Meeting November 10th is now in session. Who has invocation today? Councilman Maniscalco.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure this morning to welcome Victor DeMaio to give the invocation. He's no stranger to Tampa City Hall. His family is well-respected, longtime family. His father, Victor Sr., and his mother, Mercy, always very, very involved. As a kid growing up, I would hear one of the names, if you wanted anything done, you had to go see Big Vic, as they would call him. He was one of the people, and he was always very involved and dedicated himself to always giving back and helping anyone he could in need. Very good reputation, very well-respected. So we have his son, Victor Rudy DeMaio, here to give the invocation. So if you would please stand and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
I am Catholic, but in honor of Yom Kippur, who just happened yesterday, I have Malka Isaac here as well. So we have to, even though I'll give this in a Catholic version, I want to recognize my friends in the Jewish community as well, since we're on the tail end of the Yom Kippur celebration. So to all my Jewish friends, thank you. To the rest of us, I want everybody to bow our heads in prayer. Lord, please give us strength to make the right decisions and do the right things, and not only for ourselves but and our families, but for all the citizens of Tampa. May you give us grace and blessings, and may you see us through these times. Even though things are prosperous now, they may not be there always, so we have to think about the future. May you give us grace and blessing through our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Dingfelder, Goods, Maniscalco, Vieira,
Here.
Miranda, Carlson, and Citro.
Here.
Catholic oath, Randy.
Okay, today item agenda number 1. Fred Hendry, are you going to give that to us today, Chief?
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Board. John Bennett, Chief of Staff. I was informed this morning that Mr. Henry could not make it on short notice. The short notice was that he could not make it. So we were going to roll right into item 2, and then Mr. Henry's report will be covered by the respective CRA manager, if that's acceptable.
Sounds good. We'll go to item number 2, and that is you, Chief Bennett.
And I will turn it over to our West Tampa CRA manager.
All right, thanks, Chief. Good morning, Chair and Board. If we have the presentation. So this is a new format that we're starting this month with you all. Your respective CRA managers will come up and give a report on our respective areas. If there is something that you would like us to cover that may not be on your regular agenda, if you let us know before the meeting, that's what we can focus on during this portion of the meeting. And I will try to be brief. So moving forward with West Tampa, the West Tampa CAC is hard at work in the subcommittee process. We have 4 subcommittees: special events, infrastructure, economic development, and housing. Our housing subcommittee is working on a partnership with the city's housing department on a rehabilitation program, something similar to the item that you will see later on in this agenda coming out of East Tampa. Our special events subcommittee continues to evaluate applications for special events in the West Tampa CRA. and we recently completed our second annual cultural festival. Our infrastructure subcommittee met just last night, and they are hard at work at taking a look at the West Tampa overlay. And our economic subcommittee is addressing workforce development, brownfields, marketing, and looking into land banking. In West Tampa, our commercial facade grant program was just approved in April, and so far we've approved 3 grants for a little over $100,000, leveraging close to $770,000 in private investment. Indirect CRA activities, our stormwater department is currently under construction of the Cypress Street Fall out Phase 1 on Cash Street. The green spine that's also along Cash Street connecting to downtown is designed and preparing for construction. The Housing Authority is underway on construction of 2 projects, one on the corner of Rome and Main, the Renaissance project, as well as the rehabilitation of the Mary McLeod Bethune high rise. Notable events in West Tampa. Next week, this is just an announcement, and I have a flyer here, if we could put that on the overhead. Next week, we will be hosting a workshop on homestead exemptions at Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park. Bob Henriquez, the property appraiser, is going to lead that discussion for us. And lastly, I'd like to thank Chair Citro, Member Goods, Member Maniscalco for coming out and helping us celebrate 2 giants in the West Tampa area on, I guess that was 2 Sundays ago at our Unity and Cultural Festival. And these pictures kind of represent the mood that day. It was hot, but it was a lot of smiling faces, and we think it was a successful event. Moving on to Drew Park, the largest undertaking. We're preparing for the construction of the Tampa Bay Boulevard Linear Park. Construction should begin this month. Staff is also working with our contract administration department to finalize the selection of a professional services firm to update our Drew Park strategic plan. And just our facade grant program, we do consider successful in Drew Park. It was approved in 2009, almost 10 years ago. So far, we've approved 39 grants for a little over $1.1 million, and we've leveraged $3.6 million in private investment. Indirect activities, HCC completed their $23 million Allied Health building. There was a grand opening event that many of you attended a few weeks ago. The stadium project is a large construction project along Dale Mabry Highway. Consists of a new Radisson, a new Econo Lodge, a Tivy Pet Hotel, and a veterinary clinic, as well as some other commercial buildings. And across the street from Drew Park, there was a ribbon cutting last week for the new CAE USA building. We're hopeful that with all those new folks and all those new jobs in the area, that they will support those small businesses in Drew Park. And again, notable events was the ribbon cutting of the Allied Health building. Now I'll turn it over to Courtney Orr and Ebor.
Excuse me. Councilman Carlson, then Councilman Booth.
I just want to ask you, I went to the CAA opening the other day, but was the CRA involved at all in that?
No, they're outside of the boundary of the CRA, but with that many jobs coming that close to our CRA, we're hopeful that they will help support those businesses.
I just wanted to thank whoever came up with the new format for separating the direct and indirect. It's much clearer, so thank you all for doing that.
I know who came up with the format. Probably Chief Bennett probably came up with this format. But it's a great format. This is something we can always go back and look at. It's a great job to Chief and the staff. I attended the event. I know you worked very hard, Malcolm. You were out there, from sun up to sundown, so we appreciate your efforts. It's hard putting on an event sometimes when you believe that you got a lot of help and only a few show up. So I commend you for the efforts you did, and for the 2 people that I know very, very closely, and one was a relative. It was very, she felt very proud that to be honored. So thank you for your work and your efforts.
Thank you, Malcolm.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Orr.
Good morning, Courtney Orr, CRA Manager of Ybor City. Some of the highlights that we have in the direct category is that something you'll hear more in detail about later in the agenda is the facade grant program. We did have a discussion at our board meeting what the group would like to do, and the only suggestion that they had made at this time was that they would like for the waiting period to no longer be 24 months, but to be 12 months. So you'll hear more about that by Michelle later in the agenda. But we did take that to the board, and they weighed in. So they would like the one change to be the 24 down to 12 months waiting period. The YCDC board did approve its vision plan that we've been working on since January of this year. So we will be submitting that to you shortly for your review and hopefully approval at the November 14th meeting. And then the Planning Commission will review and approve at its November 18th meeting. We've been working on a lot of aesthetics in the district, and you'll see some Palm Avenue median improvements that will be completed this month. We've also been working on Centennial Park with its irrigation system and replaced the palm trees that weren't looking that well, and one that had died and was gone. So we actually have replaced 3 palm trees. So we're trying to make the park spruced up, look spruced up, and so it's looking really well. Also, we were given a donation from the Ybor City Roundtable to improve the immigrant statue in Centennial Park. So due to a $10,500 contribution from that organization, we've been able to repair the imperfections of that statue in Centennial Park. We have actually been continuing communication with the City of Tampa Housing Department. We'd like to have a program that reflects what East Tampa is doing in regard to the rehabilitation program. So I will be going to the board to discuss infusing money into that program so that we can help with the rehabilitation of the homes. So I'm in discussions with Vanessa McCleary on that, so hopefully that'll come to you in the next few months once I get YCDC board approval of where to pull that money from to repurpose it into that program. We've been working very closely with the parking and facility staff, making sure that our garages are safe and well-maintained. We have new camera surveillance equipment in both garages, and both garage restrooms are underway with improvements to each. We've also been working with them in regard to what we would like to put monies toward for fiscal year 20 for parking projects. As far as indirect, through our Public Safety and Transportation Committee, we take suggestions from the community as far as what they feel may be unsafe roadways, unsafe multi-way stops. So we took some of those concerns to the Parking or Transportation Division, and they've been studying some of those concerns that the community has where they feel some of the areas are unsafe. So a few of those have been approved that they warranted a multi-way stop versus two-way stop. So the community is very happy about that. And as far as our outreach to Ybor stakeholders, we're always talking with various stakeholder groups, one being Hillsborough County, the Hillsborough Community College campus in Ybor. They have many events there at their facility. So staff met with the Theater, Dance, and Arts Department to help facilitate communication and cross-promotion of those showcased events on their campus in Ybor City. We're excited that the Barrio Latino Commission, through some funding assistance from the YCDC board, that they're going to be upgrading the urban design guidelines. So we'll stay engaged with the Barrio Latino Commission and they'll allow us hopefully to have some weigh-in on the design guideline process. And we had a interesting presentation from Michael Mintzberg, who is the owner of Site Realty. He presented to our Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development Committee with his projects that he has underway, which are pretty significant. There's a 4-story mixed-use apartment project with 254 units and 11,500 square feet of retail. That's just off of Adamo, across from Coppertail. And so that broke ground a few weeks ago. There's a 7,500 square foot office building along 7th Avenue with a coffee house and wine bar, and that grand opening for the coffee house and wine bar is tomorrow. So if you're able to attend, that would be great. The grand opening is all day long. However, if you'd like to be at the ribbon cutting, that's at 8:30 in the morning.
Where is this?
It's right adjacent to the railroad track, 20th and 6th.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. And then he's also done renovations of 12 duplexes along 12th Avenue, and he considered those to be attainable housing. He has targeted the sale point at 170 to 210. I don't think he settled in on a specific price yet, but he does consider that to be an attainable housing project, as well as some infill of casitas along 4th Avenue. As far as notable events, we're proud to say that the More and Ybor campaign did win a state award and another local award. So we'll be receiving at the ceremony at the Florida Redevelopment Association conference on October 17th. We'll be receiving that statewide award from that organization. And then we'll be accepting the local award at the October 29th event at the Pepin Center. So we've invited CRA board to attend, so if you can, we'd really appreciate that. Something interesting that the associations, the neighborhood associations started, they just did a small group of community members that did a bicycle ride through Ybor City and East Ybor, just to note things that street lighting, vegetation overgrowth, the roadways. So they went out and did a very, very slow bike ride to document things that might need improvements, and then they're going to report back to us so that we can address those things that they found along the way. And then I already mentioned to you about the immigrant statue that has been repaired. So that ends my report. If you have any questions.
Any questions? I have one. The bougainvillea that were taken out of the medians from Palm Avenue, what's going to go in their place?
Can I get back to you on that? I don't have the exact landscaping information with me right now, but I can let you know.
Okay, thank you. Orlando, excuse me, Councilor Goods.
I understand we had a big meeting yesterday.
Oh, yes.
How did that go? I've been asking for that for a long time. How did that go?
Yeah, sorry, it slipped my mind. Yes, the chair persons from each of the CACs were invited to attend with each of the CRA managers, just to do a little powwow type of meeting, just share ideas of what each CRA is doing. And so we talked about a lot of things like security cameras in the district, East Tampa's contribution to the community housing programs, Super Bowl, what's each doing for what is each district doing with Super Bowl on the horizon. So we talked about a lot of different things just to glean some ideas from one another, and we're going to start to do those on a quarterly basis. So our next one's getting scheduled for January.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. If someone has a great idea, make them pass it on to somebody else. I'm glad we're doing that now.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you,
All right,
Ms.
thank
Orr.
you.
Rob, are you up now?
No, it's Ed.
Oh. Ed, how you doing?
Good morning, Board. Ed Johnson, East Tampa CRA Manager. See if we can get the slides to advance here. There we go. Here we go. In East Tampa, what we're working on in September here. On your agenda later this morning for consideration and approval are two programs that the East Tampa Advisory Committee has offered up for affordable housing. The first one is a $500,000 funding in conjunction with our Housing and Community Development Division's Housing and Rehabilitation Assistance Program. The goal of this program is to assist 30 individuals at a maximum of $15,000 per applicant. And again, it's on the agenda for approval this morning. The second program is a $400,000 funding to create the East Tampa Down Payment Assistance Program and Homebuyer Education Workshop. Again, these funds hopefully will assist approximately 25 individuals at a maximum of $15,000 per applicant. The unique feature of this program is that the homebuyers education program is actually a homebuyers club, where each applicant will go through pre and post education requirements. It's a 14-week course that's in conjunction with accepting down payment assistance dollars. The next one is the CAC has authorized the issuance of an RFP to interested developers and contractors to propose potential mixed-use development concepts using the vacant infill properties that were remaining in the CRA. The final scoring and rankings have been completed. There will be a last meeting that's scheduled for November 13th, where the shortlisted folks will come and make presentations, and so awards are pending announcement. The CAC also authorized the issuance of an RFQ to interested consultants to update the East Tampa Strategic Action Plan. The submittals were received on September 19th. 5 qualified submittals were received and have been reviewed and scored. 2 advisory committee members were part of the review and scoring process. The CCNA shortlist presentation has been scheduled for October 15th at 10:30 a.m. here in the council chambers. Also, like West Tampa, our commercial facade program has been, we feel, has been very successful over the years. We've approved 27 grants for a total of $862,137 in grant funding, which leveraged $3,143,623 in private investment. And of course, that program was approved by the board back in November of 2009. Our indirect activities, as everyone has been hearing from past presentations, the 34th Street North from Columbus Drive to East Hillsborough Avenue project is underway. The city contract and FDOT lap contract in the amount of $3.3 million. The bid opened October 1st. Remember, this is a safety improvement project along the corridor. City council approval is scheduled for December 19th and award scheduled for January 2020. The second one I want to bring up for note is the East Columbus Drive from North Nebraska going over to North 14th Street project. This is also a city contract partnered with FDOT lap project. The departments have received 100% design and construction documents for review, and responses were due October 11th. This is an approximately $2.3 million project. It's a bike, lighting, sidewalk, and safety project, with also some streets receiving some new added trees along the corridor. Notable events. Planning effort began for our 13th annual East Tampa Christmas tree lighting program scheduled for Friday, December 13th, 2019 at Young Middle School. Market rate housing, and I think I mentioned this the last time we met, the steel frame housing concept is, a house is being constructed right now at 2604 East Chelsea Street. And the photograph there on the left of the screen there is a picture of what it looks like in the interior-wise of the steel-framed housing. This is a 1,800 square foot home. It's being built by Gem Development. Also, going along with housing construction, the young man that you see pictured there in the bottom right, his name is Mr. Kyler Browning. Kyler was the recipient of the very first STEM exposure camp around architectural design for revitalizing East Tampa. And his design was the camp at the end of the camp session. His design was picked #1 overall. And the interesting thing here for us today is that his design is being used by a contractor building a 1,700 square foot house at 3605 East Caracas. And that home is the home of his grandmother. So that ends my presentation. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Ed. A couple of questions. Just more out of curiosity than anything, on the steel frame house, what are they going to do on the exterior? Do you have any sense of that?
The exterior is,
Is it a composite or something?
it's a composite type
Material?
materials that are built almost similar to slatted type surface exposures on the outside of that.
So folks driving down the street will see this house and just think it's a new house. They won't have any idea.
That it was steel. You can't tell from looking from the outside it was all steel construction that was done to it. But it's very well done. The material that they use for the steel frame is manufactured locally in Sarasota and shipped to various sites. This particular house is the fourth home that he has built, not within East, it's the first one in East Tampa, but he's built them in other parts of the city and in Hillsborough County. It's been very successful. The other projects on each one of those houses have been sold in the neighborhood of $250,000. So it's a market rate product that has been very well received. And this is his first one here in the East Tampa community. Yeah, on the one of the very first slides, if we can go back to the presentation, go back to the very first slide. They're up in the upper right-hand corner.
Oh, cool.
That's a picture of the exterior of the home.
Very nice. In regard to other new private development, maybe next month or the month after, and I would say East Tampa, perhaps West Tampa, I'd be curious to see what sort of new construction, new home starts we're looking at. Obviously, as a CRA, we want to, not just do, do our work, but to inspire the private sector to do theirs as well. And I think that's happening in East Tampa and West Tampa. But if you could maybe get with construction services and perhaps give us an idea periodically of new home starts or finishes, whatever's the easiest statistic to come up with.
Okay, be glad to do that.
Yeah. One other thing is, in your report, you mentioned about, I think it's right there, I know it's not, you mentioned about an RFP or an RFQ in regard to the multi-unit project.
Yes.
And I don't know if this board has actually seen the RFP or the RFQ when it went out. Maybe the prior board did, I'm not sure. But could you get us, just email us that so we have an idea of,
Yes.
of a better idea of what this project is before it comes to us for approval?
Not a problem.
And
Be glad to do
Mr.
that.
Bennett, I've said that a couple of times in regard to all RFPs, big RFPs that are going out in the city. That's all I have on this one. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Question.
Councilman Good.
That product at $250, is that the only price level he has? Is that market rate style?
That is the only, that's the only house that he has right now. But he has other products that he's going to try to introduce to the market, but they haven't been introduced yet. They're trying to get a feel for how this particular one goes.
I did get your email in reference to the environmental pond. I don't know how we missed that, but I'm going to make a motion at the end to bring that back for November 14th, so you'll know. And I did have a meeting with Jean yesterday in reference to that issue, and I think that she's going to give a great presentation on the 14th in reference to that. Right. And we talked about development of that property, and we talked about what they call the RFQ. And I met with Michelle yesterday too in reference to development of properties and obtaining properties. I think we have to obtain assets in East Tampa to really get things moving and to be able to entice people to know what we have. I had a meeting with the Builders Association. The first thing they asked me, what can we do for East Tampa? And I told them that we need to come and build affordable housing. There are areas in our district that I think that they should be interested in. And as soon as I mentioned a couple of properties, before I could look up, they're on their phone already like, wow, that's a big property. So I think we need to have a more aggressive approach. Once we get this information back, I've relayed to Michelle and referenced some things that I want the board to understand where I'm coming from, and hopefully that she'll give that, you'll take that back to your CDC board and have an aggressive approach in reference to development. We have to aggressively go to people. People just ain't gonna come to us. We've got to put things out there so people can know what we have, so they can say, I want to bite on that. So that's what I'm looking for more with the CRA, to make sure that we're putting things out to people so they know what we have and be able to really come and help us out with our needs.
So noted.
Thank you.
Any other further questions? Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, and Mr. Good's good comment, and you just reminded me of one other question. You know, in the past, when the city was doing some of these, Ed, and I don't know if you were here, Mayor's Challenge Fund and that sort of thing, it used to be for first-time home buyers in terms of the down payment assistance and other types of assistance was limited to first-time home buyers. I don't see that as part of the criteria. I'm not stating necessarily how I feel about it, but I'm just curious, am I correct? And also, you know, what's the discussion on that?
Yes, it's still first-time home buyers.
It's still first time? Okay, because I didn't see that on the list of criteria, I don't think. But it says current homeowners are not eligible, but I guess what I wondered about was, let's say if somebody had bought a house 15 years ago and lost it in the recession or something like that, are they eligible or not?
I believe that if it was that long ago, yes. I think the criteria is like 5 years. If if it was more recent than that, then you wouldn't be considered a first-time home buyer.
Okay.
But 15 years ago, there is an opportunity for someone to then come back through a program.
I would
like
hope
that.
so, a little grace period, you know.
Yes.
Obviously, a lot of people, no fault of their own, lost their houses.
That's correct.
And we shouldn't hold that against them the rest of their lives, so.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Councilman Goods.
I was at a housing meeting the other day. Very good what the county is doing. And eventually, I'm probably going to talk to the chief of staff in housing about the ordinance that they prepared in reference to their trust. I think it's a good one. There's a company, I think it's Blue Sky Company. I think the CHCBC needs to have a conversation with that gentleman. They're doing some wonderful things. They're coming under that medium income, and I think with maybe some properties that we may have, or some things that we can obtain from the CRA as far as assets, maybe even to help that company. Not saying they're only ones, but they caught my eye. And also the builders talked about, they like to really want to come in East Tampa and to help out, but we got some challenges as it relates to some incentives to do certain things, especially when you talk about some of the site plans as far as drainage and other issues that you have to do. And their thing is that they love to give back as well, and we may have to look at how we can come up with some type of plan to where if we're giving an incentive, they also give back, and it works out for a win-win. And another thing they talked about, and I know we've got some things coming up in reference to trees, and I'm glad, I didn't see it on the screen, but I'm glad that I think you've got a program that's going to be helping with trees. I talked to Michelle on that yesterday. That should be notable because I got like 5 or 6 senior citizens that are about 90 years old that need their trees cut because it's on their house, and they can't afford to get those things done. So I'm glad that that's being implemented. That's really going to help our communities. But these little small things that the builders are talking about, and maybe come a time that our managers need to meet with some of these building associations and see what these challenges are, especially in East Tampa, to help them, and maybe we can help them. I think that will be good, and I think that can really push the needle if we know what those challenges really are.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Ed.
All right. Next up will be Rob from downtown.
Good morning. Rob Rosner, Downtown Project Program Manager. Thank you. So our first of the direct activities is Herman Massey Park rehabilitation. We're about the 60% mark right now, and we're working on 90% drawings. And we expect to commence construction in early 2020. And that was approved earlier this year in April. The Tampa Convention Center renovations, we're nearly 100% complete with all the work that we've contracted with R.R. Simmons. We're going to be putting an RFQ out for the larger amount of work that we have, and due to the size of the scale of the project, that's why we're going out for another RFQ. You'll see that soon. Next slide. Maybe. What'd I do? There we go, sorry. So our indirect activities, we have a lot of developments that are going on downtown. Madeira, Tampa, mixed-use development that's right next to the Times building. They've started their lane closures and started the preliminary work on the construction. Right next to them is Tyler Residences, and they'll be doing their groundbreaking in late October, early November. They're looking for times with the mayor's office and you gentlemen about having the groundbreaking for that. Riverwalk Place, they're under demolition of the Cap Trust building, which is one of the first things to get their work done. The Waterside Marriott Hotel has just completed $50 million worth of renovations and opened up a new restaurant there called Anchor and Brine. And I believe that is, they either had it this week or next week is their official grand opening on that. Notable events, the Urban Excellence Awards are to be held in November in Harpoon Harry's and the Sail Pavilion were both selected for that, for the Urban Excellence Awards. Do we have any questions for downtown? We'll move on. We have the screen back. Channel District, district-wide projects. We're on our way for getting 90% plans done for Channelside Drive. We're under construction for 12th Street Segment C, which is Phase A1 and A2. The other ones we're in early design on and working with TICO on a lot of the undergrounding that goes with that and working with them on 2 different levels of moving overhead power lines underground and changing out lights to the new system and to everything will be LED then. I'm not going to go through every one of these because as you can see, most of them are in design and between 15 and 25%. Direct activities, Madison Street Park is about 30% complete right now, and we've finished pretty much all of the site remediation work, and we're working to get all the materials ordered for that are going to be installed in the park. Indirect activities there are SPP is nearing the completion of Sparkman Wharf. If you've been on Channelside Drive recently, you'll see that they have all their scaffolds up. They should be done here in the next 2 months or so, and they'll be highlighted at the FRA conference as we do one of our mobile tours about that. Notable events, the Channel Club held their grand opening, and just another day later, the Hampton Inn Home 2 Suites held their grand opening. So we've had some really good successes in the Channel District and finally getting some things open and operational. Any questions?
Any questions? Councilman Dingfelder.
2 questions. Number one, in regard to the Publix, is there any traffic issue? I know originally there was some concern about traffic and that sort of thing. Is it flow smoothly in and around Publix at the busy times?
Yeah, I'm hearing so that it's running smooth. I haven't heard any complaints about it not running smoothly.
Yeah, and then at the meeting I attended, I don't know if it was the last CAC meeting or the one before that, over in the CRA district, the discussion came up about floor area ratio. I think you were there at the time.
Right.
Some of the members who also are some of the property owners, major property owners of the few remaining vacant parcels over there, were asking me why is their floor area ratio, their FAR, lower than the SPP or the downtown FAR. And historically, I know why it was lower is because originally the concept for Channelside was to be little 3-story, 4-story buildings, and obviously over the last decade or so we've gotten away from that concept, which is fine. So now Channelside is more or less just the eastern extension of downtown. which is also fine, and there's great progress over there. But I guess they asked the question out of fairness, why shouldn't their FARs be as high as downtown so they can be competitive and use their land to the maximum? And anyway, I guess I'm just wondering from your professional perspective, do you have any feelings on that? It's probably more of a city council issue, but I'm asking you now just because you happen to be here and you don't usually come to our city council meetings.
Okay, so I followed up with Kathy Coyle, and downtown is covered by a DRI, and Channel District's not part of that. So the reason for us being able to do what we did in downtown and why those are is a DRI governs that. So Channel District is a more traditional, so that obviously would have to go through its normal process if you want to do a land use change or rewrite what the Channel District code would be. It'd be just a normal process as opposed to part of the DRI. So you couldn't just extend downtowns because the Channel District's not part of that DRI.
Sure.
You
But,
could make one that looks like it and acts like it, but you'd have to go through a different process.
but Kathy indicated to you that it's still feasible for us to explore that?
Yeah, and I don't know all of the level of work that would have to go into doing that. I just know that it would be more complicated than with the DRI.
Okay.
The
put
DRI's
Andrea-
already has
We'll
a
put
fixed
Andrea on
amount.
it.
Yeah,
Thank you, Rob.
you're welcome.
Any other questions? Councilman Carlson?
Not for discussion today, but in prior meetings, we talked about the importance of affordable housing and CRAs. And when we talk about strategic planning and the executive director and everything, I'm sure that will come up. But I would just ask all of you to think about how you can put some elements of housing, affordable housing in your, or workforce housing in your markets. And we can all talk to you offline about that. But sometime in the next few months, I think we need to come back to it. I was just with the Tampa Chamber in Charlotte, and they set ending poverty as an important criteria for their community, and also affordable housing. And they're behind also, but I think we need to use every tool we have. And I know the mayor's got a task force focused on that, but we have resources in these CRAs that we can use. And an example is the work in and around the Publix to get that done. But if we can put the same kind of effort into getting affordable housing close to where people work, we'll take trips off the road, and we'll keep some of our best workers close to home. Thank you.
Welcome.
Councilman Goode.
Great point, Mr. Carlson. I have several friends that have built in downtown and in Channel Side, and the thing they tell me is that they have their market rate, but there's no incentive. And if the CRAs have this type of money in there, these people are building, I think we need to look at looking at some incentives to be able to get affordable housing in some of these major developments in downtown and in the Channel District. No one has to know it's affordable housing. All they know is someone's renting an apartment. I know some people have this NIMBY theory, not in my backyard theory, but you don't have to know what's in your backyard if you don't disclose what's in your backyard. Just people that are renting an apartment. So I think we need to look at the money that we have in these CRAs to be able to give incentives to some of these developers who have in that housing market, and that'll help with some of the crises that we do have. I thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Carlson, but I think we need to sternly look at that agenda.
Councilman Carlson.
About 20, this is more directed to Mr. Bennett. About 20 years ago, back in the 90s, I was on the downtown housing committee of the St. Pete Chamber, and we kept hitting the wall and trying to get downtown housing. And finally, we pulled together a group of developers because the theory was that developers in Florida at that time only knew greenfield development. And then we brought developers from Chicago and other places to talk to them. It turned out that one of the Chicago people we brought built a couple of the buildings on Beach Drive. One of the pieces of feedback that I heard campaigning, I haven't heard it in the last few months, but I heard campaigning was that there are a lot of private sector and nonprofit people who want to build affordable housing and partner to build components of affordable housing within market rate housing projects, but they felt like it wasn't a level playing field inside the city, that they didn't get fair access inside the city. And I know you're changing all that, the new mayor's changing all of that, but I was just thinking maybe we should, besides the task force and the committee that the mayor has, maybe joint city CRA conversation with all the developers who want to develop and just have a conversation with them about what we could do, what resource we have. We have lots of different resources we can bring to the table. The first one is just opening everything up to be a level playing field. Second is, what land do we have? What incentives we have? How else can we collaborate like this with infrastructure? So anyway, just an idea, and we can talk about offline. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Vieira.
And I want to build on that, and Councilman Carlson, very good point. In fact, somebody brought that up. You wouldn't have been there because you couldn't be there, but when I was speaking at Cafe Con Tampa, and somebody actually brought up this very issue. And I think it's something that's very important. The overall issue is that we have to change the assumption or the presumption that residential housing in downtown Tampa is going to be for people who are more affluent. That is an assumption that whether or not we all know it, we have in one way or another bought into, and we've got to know all the tools that we have as a CRA in order to battle that assumption and to make sure that we have housing for the people who work downtown, not just the lawyers and the developers and the engineers, and God bless lawyers, developers, and engineers, especially lawyers. I'm joking, I'm an attorney. But we got to make sure that we have housing for everybody in downtown. We've got to fight that presumption. There is a presumption that's developed, and we got to know everything that we can do to fight that presumption. So a good point, sir.
Any other? Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you. Board, you'll recall, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, when the Planning Commission was here in the evening, and I sort of very vigorously was arguing against a code amendment that was being proposed, or maybe it was a plan amendment. It had to do with FARs, and part of it was that the proposal was to increase the FAR without the developers giving anything. And in those certain areas. And I appreciate council suspended that for at least, I think, a year or 6 months or something like that, so we can think about it. But the reason I mention it is it specifically can and does relate to affordable housing. Because if you, under the current codes, there's incentive there for developers. They can get bonus FARs if they do some affordable housing. That's one of the opportunities. And if you give them the FAR without otherwise creating any incentive package or anything like that, then there's not really a lot of incentive for them to do that. So I appreciate council continuing this discussion.
Councilman Miranda.
Just my unsolicited idea. You're never going to solve what problem we have the way we're doing it. It's going to take a long, long time, and it's going to need help from the outside sources, individuals who can pool money together to have the loans available to build the houses at about 3% interest. And there's a lot of people in Tampa, and I don't even know if it's legal. I know it's not legal to ask the citizens to hold a bond for the city. Yeah, you can tax them to death, but you can't ask them for a loan and pay them interest. What a country. So when you look at these things and you start to realize how do you solve this massive problem that wasn't created overnight, taken years to get here. And the problem is as more people come in and less houses are built, the price of value goes up. When you could buy a lot 10 years ago for $25,000, that same lot now is $100,000. You don't believe me, go buy one. That's the problem you have. Even in giving the lot away, the houses are still 160, 170. 179, 189. Affordable to who? So that's the problem we have. I may be wrong. I don't think I am until you set a pool of money aside, and not from the government, from individuals who are willing to pool and get a return if the same bank is giving them 3% to help somebody that's a human being. You're not going to solve this problem. This problem will never be solved by government. Never. First of all, you don't have enough land. You say you're going to build. You're not. You're only fooling yourself, not the people. The people know you're a fool already when you start talking about it. So what I'm saying is you got to sit back and how do you solve this problem? You're not going to solve it today. You're going to need a 10-year program and work to that program to the end. And still then you're going to fall short, but you're going to benefit many people. So in order to do that, you got to see if it's legally possible. Set up a subcommittee, nobody in government, individuals. Anybody in the audience, anybody who's listening who wants to put $100,000, $50,000, and get that back at them at 3%, and the city or government, whatever it is, controls the action of it, you're not gonna solve housing problems the way we're attacking it, never. Unless you have mass amount of money by individuals who have money, who's willing to participate, and I think there's a lot of them. Once you start the program speaking about it, you'll have some impact. Whether you're gonna solve 100%, I doubt it, but you're certainly gonna reach the people that need it. You can sit here and talk about affordable housing till you're dead, and it ain't gonna be solved. Thank you.
Anything else? If I may add to that, I know one thing is for sure, our downtown is growing. And I know the SPP project is gonna bring a minimum of 3,000 people to the downtown area. With that, you are gonna need the lawyers, you are gonna need the jewelers, you are going to need the grocery stores, you are gonna need the hairstylists, you're gonna need the shoe repair people. And people from East Hillsborough County, from North Hillsborough County are not gonna travel all this way. Gas, insurance, maintenance, upkeep, and parking for a $10, $12 an hour position. I know one thing is for sure, they're probably gonna ask for $15 to $20 an hour to drive all this way. Something is gonna have to be done. I agree with Councilman Miranda. Thank you very much, Rob.
You're welcome. We have two left.
Oh, we interrupted you.
Oh, that's okay. See if this thing will work. Tampa Heights. Our direct activities is one of the things that we've done is to help program the areas like the areas around Eulali's at Waterworks Park and some of the street festivals they want to do there. They wanted to create an event co-sponsorship very similar to downtown. We'll be bringing that to you next month. They did a vote to do that with some limitations that are different than theirs. Indirect activities, so Capital, who owns most of the property there, has done announced Sprouts as part of their grocery store and as part of their permitted garage, and there'll be a hotel going on above that, right near the Heights Union building. And the Pearl Apartments are complete, and the corner park is under construction. I haven't visited to see if it's 100% complete yet, but it should be. They have a new co-work space called Bay 3 that launched this past year. Notable events is the Heights Market opened a new rooftop bar called The Bar. And they also have Stone's Throw, which is out there on the Riverwalk. And they've improved the entrance to the north part of the park as part of that. And they opened on July 23rd. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Roger.
And then Central Park, I apologize. Central Park, the direct activities we had was, I'm sorry, there's 4 of them.
Take your time.
So the Meacham Community Garden, they voted to program $20,000 to help with the education component of that, and we're working with the Housing Authority, who's got that through permitting at this time. So then indirect activities, Encore Tampa, as they submitted an incremental site plan for another 282 units on Lot 9. We haven't seen the actual developer come with that, but they have some preliminary plans. I don't know if the deal is 100%, but in doing so, they also have been in negotiations with Liberty Group about other opportunities there. There's a hotel component as part of Encore. And that concludes my report.
Any last questions? Councilman Goods.
Rob, that property, is it all owned by Tampa Housing Authority?
Yes, that's all controlled by Tampa Housing Authority.
What kind of relationship do we have with them as relates to CRA or just in general dealing with them?
We work with them regularly because we paid to do the CRA plan and to do that, and our partnership with them was for them to develop these as mixed income and mixed housing for doing that, and then they would market the other lots, and then so we paid for construction plans for the infrastructure, and we paid for the plan for CRA plan, and that's what we just recently paid off the debt for.
And again, I say this because again, I talked to a bunch of people, and they're saying there's so much property there that who's inviting them to come in to try to build there? I mean, there's so much property that you can have more buildings on that property for workforce housing. So I'm just wondering, again, we got to put the foot on the gas and put some stuff out to some people to entice them to come in and build on that property. It's sitting there. We can't just let stuff just sit there and sit there and sit there. We got to push the needle and get things out to people so people can come in and bite on it to build. But several developers, I was riding the other day and was like, that property over there, man, that needs to be developed. Man, it's just sitting there. So what is the future for that?
Well, if you talk with Leroy Moore, with the Housing Authority, he's in charge of recruiting those, and they've had a lot of near complete deals, either that fallen through or they didn't take the bait on it or bite on it. So there have been some that we've been informed of, and that we're able to help with what we can. But with them controlling the property, we've had a small grocery store at one point, but they wanted to take more land than needed for surface parking, and that was not an option. Again, with the hotel site, we already had discussions with that. It goes through the housing authority who controls that land. So.
Well, that's my question. So basically, the housing authority is controlling that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilman Carlson.
Yeah, along the same lines, I get asked about that property all the time and why it hasn't been developed. It's, the other parts of it were developed a long time ago, and folks wonder why it's not developed. And I know you just explained it's not your issue, but on the chamber trip, the last couple of days, people were asking me about that land too. And I don't believe that we should not replace spatial segregation with spatial segregation along income lines. And I'm glad that it's mixed use. But if there's anything we can do to get some of those properties moving, it would be great. And we can all talk about it offline. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Councilman, excuse me, Rob? Yes. Councilman Dingfelder.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just following up on both of these last comments. Rob and Mr. Bennett, why don't we respectfully ask Leroy Moore from the Housing Authority to come join us next month to give us an update on that important project? Okay. I think there are some legitimate questions. I respect Mr. Moore and everybody over at the Housing Authority tremendously. But, we might as well just hear it from the horse's mouth. So, and I'm sure, I just saw Mr. Moore yesterday, and I'm sure they'd be glad to come over. So.
Happy to arrange that for you.
Thank you.
Rob, one more second. Yes, Councilman Dingfelder, I truly agree with you, but we have to make sure that those properties are built correctly the first time. One of the buildings over there had to be redone. And I'm wondering why that had to be done. Should have been done properly the first time, but that's a different statement. Thank you, Councilman Dingfelder.
Another good question for him, I guess.
Yes, it will be a great question for him. Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Our staff report's finished?
I think he started with downtown.
Yes. Item agenda, we're going to go back to item agenda number 1. Is that person here?
No.
Nope. Councilman Carlson.
For item agenda number 3, I would move that we move this to November 14th. I met with staff, I think you all did as well, and the idea here was that we pass the renewal of the outsource agreement between the CRA and the city, with one of the provisions being that we would edit the 18 items in the contract. And I met with staff the other day. I think it's just going to take another week or so to finish it. So if you all have any other input, please let them know. But in the meantime, I'll be working with them, and I propose that on the 14th we would just come back and present for your input and approval.
We have a motion to move item agenda number 3, excuse me, to November 14th at our next regular CRA meeting. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item agenda number 4.
Good morning, Chair and CRA board members. Michelle Van Loan, Economic and Urban Development. And if we can have the, thank you so much. I didn't realize I was going to look so shiny up there. Thank God I have a PowerPoint. So we are responding as a staff report to your motion to have a strategic planning workshop. There were 2 different motions we're responding to sort of in one presentation. The first one was Councilman Carlson asked that we put together a strategic plan proposal for you as a process to engage in as the CRA board, and then Councilman Carlson also had a second motion, and the second part of that addressed the discussion you all have been having about having some sort of executive director, direct report to the CRA board. And so we have had a lot of discussion with our CRA attorney, the chief of staff, about what's the best way to approach many of the items that the CRA board over the past 4 to 5 months has been discussing, things you've been asking about. And we keep coming back to you sort of in a vacuum. It's this topic, and then it's this topic, and we're just talking at you, or we are supplying written information hoping for you guys to sort of absorb things like 163, which is pages and pages of state statute and legalese. So we are proposing to come together in a strategic planning process to incorporate a lot of these issues that you've been asking about. So what we're proposing is 2 4-hour workshops. We're not saying you have to go 4 hours for each workshop, but we want to give you time to have your discussion in a less formal give and take type of environment. Also time for breaks in there. We're looking at only 3 topics for each session. And what we're looking at is the first session, we'd want to come to you and just very briefly go over with you what is it that 163 mandates, so that we can put context into 163 and again, not just throw legal language at you. We would talk about the limitations on TIF and how we spend, again, a very brief, relatable explanation of these items, and then talk about our community redevelopment plans. There's a lot of talk about strategic action plans, community redevelopment plans. What's the difference? What do they mean? What's required, again, by the state statute? And how do they fit into how you operate as the CRA board and how we operate out here within the CRAs themselves? And then we would like to then, once you've had those sort of briefings, we'd like to then have the discussion with you based on what you've heard, based on what has come out of the communities. What are your priorities? What are your priorities as the CRA board, overarching as an agency, and then for your CRAs? And then have a talk about what we call gap analysis. What you see is missing, what priorities, what focus is missing, and what would you like us to start focusing on? So we want that first workshop to sort of set the stage for you then to come back for our second workshop and talk about and develop your goals. As the CRA agency board itself, what are your goals for yourselves and for the CRA? You've talked several times and made comments about providing direction and guidance to the CRAs, CRA managers, the staff, and to the CACs. The CACs, the Community Advisory Committee, they act as your subcommittees. They're your specialized subcommittees tasked with the individual geographic locations to come back and bring their recommendations to you, similar to a housing subcommittee or any other type of subcommittee. So what is your direction and what kind of direction do you want to give them? So we want to provide that opportunity, again, in a less formal setting for you guys to be able to set those priorities and to adopt them as your own goals and objectives. And again, I mentioned you guys have brought up some questions, legal questions about the operations of the CRA agency, and we again want to incorporate that. So we will have a brief session to address. You've had several inquiries about how do we dissolve a CRA? What does it take? What's the process? And how do we look at doing that? What's the timing for that? So let's have that discussion, but again, not strictly as a legal discussion, but within context of how we all operate. And lastly, this is that second motion, we need to have a discussion with you. What is it that you're looking at? We can't in a vacuum come back to you and say, here's what we recommend for your executive director. So we want that give and take discussion with all of you. What is it that you're trying to address with this position? What roles and responsibilities would it have? What processes would we look at having so that we can better define that within our legal framework? And then we can come back with, okay, this is our process. This is how we partner to get this issue resolved and create what you are looking for that meets your needs. So that's in a big nutshell what we're looking at doing. And now,
Councilman Carlson, unless Chief, you want to say something first?
I just want to point out, as Michelle mentioned, we also have the ability to roll these together if we think we want to tighten the agenda. And one date that we've already, because we don't want to drag things out to the point that we've all talked about. We want to keep moving. So there was a date of October 28th. We just want to socialize with you as an opportunity, if calendars permit, to get this, this session.
October 28th?
It would be, yes. And, you know, we could do a 4-hour block either in the morning, in the midday, and obviously include a working lunch, et cetera. So we just wanted to give you an early date as opposed to letting this concept move down the road a little bit. So you can discuss that, content as well as date.
And that will take, how long of a time frame for that?
We would budget 4 hours, and then as Michelle mentioned, if we need a second one, then we could look and socialize a date for the second version. So we could combine those agendas to start with, and if we couldn't get done in the 4 hours, then we would look for a subsequent date. Maybe it would only need 2 more hours after that, or another 4
Councilman
hours.
Carlson.
Thank you all for coming back on these issues. A few comments. One is, and thank you also for the urgency on trying to do it as soon as possible. I have something, but I'm happy to change for the 28th if that makes sense for everybody else. On the background, in what you're proposing for workshop number 1, I would ask that you limit that to a half-hour. We've been through a legal briefing on the CRAs. I think we've all read 163. I passed out the grand jury report from Miami. We've all sat through other seminars on CRAs. We don't know as much as the CRA managers, but I think if you all have other information that you want us to read or see in advance, send it to us, and then we can have a briefing on what we learned. But sitting through a 2 or 3 hour lecture would be horrible, and especially since we probably know 80% of what is going to be presented. It should be more of hitting the highlights, discussion, asking questions about filling in the gaps. On some of these other issues, I really would like the result of whatever this process, the planning process, to be some kind of plan. And maybe it's a 2-page plan, maybe it's a 10-page plan. I don't think it should be longer than that. But there should be a set plan that has criteria. And you mentioned this verbally, but it's not on the list. I think we need specific criteria or guidelines to be given to the CACs and the districts as to what we would like them to spend money on and what we would not like them to spend money on. Because 163 might be this wide and we might decide that we want it to be more narrow. And some of the folks from the CACs have asked for that. They would like some guidelines. So that might inform, it might contradict the current action plans, or it might be in conjunction, but at least it would give some guidelines, and then they can look at that. Besides dissolving CRAs, lots of community leaders have given me feedback that maybe instead of dissolving them, we could look at just capping them, figuring out what our current obligations are on some of them, or what we think the obligations are going to be in the next few years, and then set a cap above which the money could go back in the general fund. And if one of the arguments against doing that is that the county money also goes in this, then we could propose an interlocal agreement with the county. And my philosophy on CRAs is that they give it the wrong incentive to focus on real estate. They force the rest of the city to subsidize those areas, and it shows a lack of trust in government. The purpose of a CRA really is that you don't trust the government to spend money in an area where you think it needs to be spent. There's a discussion right now about the USF area, and I think we're going to have a presentation on that soon. And I've given feedback to Mark and others. I think the last thing we should do is create a CRA up there. What we should do is have the discipline to partner with the city and county to make the changes and improvements that are necessary out there. We don't have to trap money in an area to do it. And some of the ones downtown, even though I'm a big supporter of downtown, it's very unfair that the rest of the city subsidizes basic services in those areas. And I think one of the guidelines we need to put in our strategic plan when we give feedback is that this is not money in this. Let's take Channelside, for example, or downtown. It's not money in the area that is the money of that area that is being spent in that area. It is the money of the entire city that the rest of the city is not. The rest of the city is subsidizing the basic services in the area, allowing that money to be there, and we have to be good custodians of how that money is spent. And so that's a lot of where I'm coming from. I think the mindset has got to be not that, well, it's our money, we have to spend it the way we want on what we want. We should get input, but we have to be thinking about what the sacrifice is that the rest of the city is making for these CRAs to exist, and we have to be good custodians of the money. The last thing is the executive director. I think we should move very quickly on that, but I agree with you that we need to get criteria. Ideally, we'd use some kind of search firm, and I don't know the current status of the head of economic development. I've been giving some feedback to staff about what kind of person I think should be in there. But if we're doing a search for that person, we might want to do them in conjunction with each other. Then I don't know if we'd have to pay an executive search firm twice, or if they could do a similar kind of search. This one may be more real estate focused and more locally focused, but where the other one may be, internationally focused also. Go ahead, sir.
And I just want to give some feedback to that. We do have that capability. We do want the inclusivity of council in that search process and the development of the language for that search process. So we're very amenable to that. We just thought that conjoining that to the strategic workshop would bring out some of those descriptors.
On the legal aspect of it, sorry to hold the floor so long, but on the legal aspect of it, I proposed that maybe that the CRA would pay the city council staff budget, and then we would just hire the CRA person out of the city council budget like we do with Marty and the legislative aides. Did you all get any legal feedback on that?
Andrew, I don't know if you...
I'm not sure I understand the question. I think in the past, my understanding is when Bob McDonough was in the position, half of his salary came from the CRA budget and half came from the city budget.
So this is a proposed change. So McDonough, what we did is we approved the budget the way it was, so the city can still use it. The money that was in there for half of Bob McDonough is still in that 1.7 million. But what I had proposed anyway was that we have a separate CRA executive director that would be ideally paid out of city council budget, but it would be funded by the CRA. And it would be a separate position altogether, because we need somebody to focus on CRAs 100% of the time. Also, if we have the accountability and responsibility for the decisions made in the CRAs, then we need to make sure that the person reporting to us is reporting to us. And then also, ideally, it would save time for the CRA managers, because city council sitting as a CRA would only have one person really to deal with, instead of the managers having to have 7 meetings on every issue.
And Councilman Carlson, your question, why can't this be done in a half hour? This is a prime example why it can't be done. And this, in my opinion, should be discussed at a workshop that should probably take about 2 hours, 3 hours. These are things that we can discuss then and there.
Well,
and I understand your point, and I've been listening to you for a long time talking about CRAs. But this board just reaffirms what the CRA boards bring to us. The decisions that the CRA boards bring to us are percolated from the community to the committees to the boards to us. If we start placing demands on these boards, then we're doing the boards disjustice.
My understanding of the law is it's the other way around. We allow we ask the CACs to give us feedback, but we set the guidelines. We could just make the decisions to fund these the way we want. And my argument is that we need to give them guidelines. As I go around and meet in the community, people are asking us to have fiscal responsibility, and there was not a lot of fiscal responsibility in the last few years, and across the board. And in particular, since we control the CRAs, we need to make sure that we have that. And not to say that particularly in the CRAs it wasn't, but we need to make sure we do it. To your point about the timing, what I'm suggesting is a half hour only on the review of the law and the existing guidelines. A 4-hour workshop on planning, I'm totally in favor of, and discussion on what kind of person, how on the executive director, that might, as you said, take an hour or two by itself. I just wanted to ask the question and see if you all have done any research on it.
Councilman Dinkfelder, hang on one second. I'll give you a term. Then and Councilman Vera. Then Michelle, please, can you come up to the lectern, please? Then can we talk about the first bringing on the council that's going to be the director for us on October 28th, and discuss that for half hour, and then go into the workshop?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, as part of the workshop, because
Correct, because time is of the essence for that.
We can put it in the order that you need, yes. We just put it as leading up to some of these bigger decision makings, but we can, it's your strategic planning workshop, so we can put it in the order that you prefer.
Councilman Dingfelder, then Councilman Vieira.
A couple of thoughts. Number one, Michelle and John, I appreciate this proposal. I agree with Mr. Bennett. I think we can consolidate all of this into a 3 or 4 hour workshop. However, you and the chair set it up in terms of sequence. I'll leave that up to the chair, in my opinion. At the workshop, we do need to resolve, or at least go into a discussion about the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail. And Mr. Chairman, you kind of alluded to that, as did some of the other members, in regard to the role of the CAC. Michelle said a few minutes ago, I believe, that they, under law, they make recommendations to us, and then we wrestle with those recommendations, and I stress that word. And I think that that's extremely relevant to certain things that are going on in the community right now. Yes, we need to take those recommendations very seriously, but I think this body needs to decide, at the end of the day, who's in charge of these final decisions. And that's not for today, but that's clearly a big picture discussion for this workshop. Mr. Carlson, I wanted to respond to one thing. I hear where you're coming from in regard to, especially you made reference to Channelside, downtown, that sort of thing. But I think we need to be really careful about one size doesn't fit all. Because we really, in my opinion, we have different animals out there in regard to the different CRA districts. They're very different, and that has popped up in the context of the facade, improvements, that sort of thing. Might not be a good fit for downtown, but out in West Tampa and East Tampa, it seems to be working. So I think philosophically, when we get into this workshop, I think we need to wrestle with that a little bit, because I hear where you're coming from on downtown and Channelside. Maybe we need to tinker with that whole picture. But out there in East Tampa and West Tampa and some of those other, Drew Park, et cetera, some of those other districts, I think it makes a lot of sense that the money that's generated in those districts stays in those districts, because those districts have a long way to go. So I think I just wanted to throw that out. In regard to dissolving CRAs, I think you kind of nip that one in the bud, Bill, but I think we need to be careful on that. And when we talk about that, let's not only get a legal analysis, but also a policy perspective on the pros and cons of dissolution. CRAs are not easy to come by, and once we have them, we need to be really careful about their futures. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Vieira.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also wanted to respond to the comments by my friend and colleague, Councilman Carlson. And a lot of them are very well taken, and I can agree with a lot of them, but I think as an overall narrative, we have to be careful to not do, how shall I put this, Tallahassee's work for them. We know that Tallahassee has an agenda whenever it comes to CRAs. Tallahassee is looking for wrongdoers in CRAs, and if they can't find them, then they will find them where there are good CRAs. We know that the city of Tampa CRAs are generally speaking very good. They're very well run as a general rule, and to the extent they're not being well run, we're making improvements because we have a very, very good system. While there are improvements that certainly could be made, we have to be careful that, again, we're not doing Tallahassee's work for them. The general idea of a CRA, which is to find areas in a community that are blighted, where you can have some targeted impacts economically made on those communities through a taxable increase in those particular communities, is one that is still worthy. I know Councilman Carlson mentioned the USF area. I'd certainly like something for the USF area, something down the line for our friends in Sulphur Springs as well. We got to be careful not to CRA the whole city. That's always the risk, right? But in other words, that is a tool that I think is very effective. I don't think that if it's correct to look at it as if we subsidize one part of the city by another part of the city. What we're doing is, by definition, taking areas that are blighted where the collective gets together and helps make economic impacts in those areas. I don't look at it as some a distribution of city wealth from one part to the other. I look at it as if the city coming together in effect to help blighted areas. And to the extent that this has to do with trust with government, again, we don't want to subsidize Tallahassee's gross mistrust of cities, which we've just begun to see with some CRA laws that have been passed and some ones that have been proposed, and they're developing political legs. Let's not help those political legs grow. That's my only caution.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Goods.
You know, as a person who had a little time on a CRA and have gone to other CRA meetings, they all operate differently. East Tampa being one of the most unique ones I've ever seen. You've got a CAC board who makes recommendations to this body. Then you have, years ago, a community type board, but really don't really have the power, but just make a recommendation they want to the CAC board, but actually the CAC board is the one that's empowered to come to this body to make a decision. By definition, Mr. Carlson is right that this board is empowered to make those decisions. But the way it's written, we allow our CAC boards to bring those recommendations to us. My biggest concern that I want to make sure we put the foot on the gas on is to hire an executive director. I believe I spoke to Ms. Van Loan yesterday in reference to that. And I believe that you can't have two masters. I think that's been kind of the problem a little bit when talking to a lot of the CAC boards. I look at, you can't have one body here, another body here, and yet you have your managers who look at the CRA board as a master, but they look at the city as the ultimate master. That doesn't work well. I look at having an executive director who answers to this board, is the liaison with whoever the city hires and have a working relationship. But I believe the managers have to be in an area to where they're like legislative aides. And they're answering directly to that executive director who's giving them direction, who's working in conjunction with the city person. I just think, again, you can't have two different bodies and expect it to be perfect. I don't see that. I think that's a problem as well. But I think hiring somebody who is strictly sole responsible for the CRAs, who can go into each CRA and clean up whatever difficulties they're having, I think that is the way to go, because you can't have one person for the city who has to worry about development on other areas who don't have CRAs and trying to manage 8 CRAs. I just don't see that, because that person's time is not all generated to the CRAs. And I just think that having a separate body, being a liaison with the city, would be more efficient. Chief?
I would just like to give you a moment of feedback pending our strategic workshop on what Councilman Goods mentioned. The administration heard that last time we were here together, and we realized that CRA manager needs to be laser focused in serving this board and working with you and our CRA managers to get the job done in the field and get those processes that the chairman talked about last time to you to give you that decision support that you need to do the best things for the community in the priorities of what this funding and the strategic action plans have brought us. And I think we're going to see a lot of growth out of this strategic workshop in that space. I think the collective energy in this room to give us the right framework to hire the right person, recruit nationally, internationally, whatever it takes. The only question I would have left on this motion item is we feel comfortable as a staff that we can internally facilitate this 4 hours. But there is also an option to look for an outside facilitator, but I'm not sure we could, that's just another voice that we would have to transfer all this information to and then try and get somebody here by the 28th. I don't think it's the best option, but I don't want to leave it off the table since it is an option.
I mean, whatever the board decides, I'm willing to be a part of, to get the information, have discussion. So Whether it's an hour, 3 hours, or 4 hours, it really doesn't matter to me. I'll go along with the consensus of the board. So I just want to make sure that we start moving, putting the foot on the gas now. We can't be waiting. We've got to move to make sure we've got things moving in these CRAs, housing, making sure we got development going on, making sure the essential products are given to the people from their TIF dollars.
And that's why we're recommending this first workshop be within 2 weeks if you count working days. So we're open to that.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, as I've said before, as long as I'm here, whatever that length of time may be, I would not vote for another CRA to be started anywhere in the city. And it's got various reasons, and I'll explain. Last year was $25 million off the budget, the City of Tampa General Fund. 25. You keep it going on, where are you gonna have 50? And then what are you gonna say? Oh, it ain't my fault, I gave it out to the CRA, they're supposed to be handling it. We got elected to be responsible. Now that we're not, we are. But you can't continue going down this road and saying this is what happened. When the general public pays taxes and the CRAs, after that minimum goes up as theirs, that general public who does not have a CRA is in essence subsidizing the CRA. You can look at it any way you want. Legally, financially, it comes out to dollars. And they're not getting the benefit they should get out of their tax dollars. And I understand about blight, and I understand that you need to face it and you got to do it. And I've heard things about downtown and this, that, and the other. When you become failure is when you try to solve all the problems at once. Can't do it. So years ago, this city didn't have anything going for it. Now we're arguing because we're going in the right direction. So what happens is this. West Shore didn't want downtown. Downtown didn't want West Shore. East Tampa didn't want West Tampa. This one they want. And what you have is failure. So why did they do downtown? Why do you have your heart in your chest? The blood's got to go down to your knees and to your feet. It's got to go up to your brain. So somebody's got to pump it. Name me one city that doesn't have a population of 250,000. 250,000 that does not have a downtown that is moving forward in a great acceleration. I'll tell you how many there are. None. So you have to have something in a city, whether it's downtown, East Tampa, West Tampa, South Tampa, Bellman Heights, I don't care where. You got to have some point that's a vocal point of that city. When you don't have a downtown, you have failure. What did you have in the 50s in Tampa? You had a vibrant downtown. You also had transportation. You also had streetcars. Same thing we got rid of, we want again. So why'd you get rid of them? Life is nothing but a circle, and it keeps following you around. It's very simple. It ain't not, you don't have to be smart to figure this thing out. If you had, I wouldn't be saying it. So what I'm saying is you got to understand that something has got to start somewhere so that the public can see it. If you have vast areas where you have nothing but blight and houses that really need repair, and you fix one in one corner and one in the other corner, and in 4 corners you built a new house, no one ever sees it. No one. But if you built those 4 houses in one block, you see a big change. People recognize it. People start to build. People start to mow the grass. People feel energized. That's why you had to do downtown. Guess what's happening now? Look at the Midtown project. Guess what's going to happen at the West Shore Mall? You think that's going to stay like it is? Any takers? And I'll gamble on it. It's going to have to change. It's going to change to something vibrant. It was vibrant before, but new things come online. Remember when you went to the hospital to get a shot, they had to boil your needles and put it in and take it out? They don't do that no more. Why? First of all, it's too costly. Second of all, it's more infection. So you just now have the needles that are real easy to put in and throw them away. Things change. My hair changed. Everything changes. But what I'm trying to tell you is that we're trying to complicate something that's really not complicated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Carlson.
just piggybacking real fast on what Councilmember Henda said, I wouldn't vote for any new CRAs either. I'm very committed to helping all parts of the city, and one of the parts that I've spent a lot of volunteer time with is the USF area and Mark Sharp's group. I just don't think that a CRA is the right solution. Besides trapping the money and making everybody else subsidize, what it does is it gives an incentive for real estate development. So the only way you get money to put into a CRA is if you develop real estate, because then you get the tax money to go in it. I don't think the problem in the USF area is real estate, it's poverty. And it's getting connectivity between the businesses that are there and the research that's going on. And so how do we connect the dots on that? How do we build the organic nature of things? How do we help people to start businesses and move out of poverty? Those are not real estate development issues. And so if you work on what's really important in the USF area, it's not going to result in high ad valorem taxes necessarily. But if we set up a CRA, we're going to be focused on ad valorem taxes because that's how we're incentivized. And what I'd rather do is look at, we could set up something like a CAC in that district and ask the community to come back and give us advice on what we should spend money on to help, like beautifying Fowler and Bush Boulevard. And then we can ask the mayor and the staff to fund that out of the general funds or other funds. We don't have to set up something to trap it. So anyway, we can talk about that more when we get to those issues. Just to respond to the chief of staff, I think that your staff is well suited to facilitate this. So I don't think we have to spend the money. If you want to, fine, or if my colleagues want to, but I don't think we need to do it.
Anybody else? Councilman Dingfelder.
Thank you. Just structurally, we were at item 3, and Mr. Carlson was talking about revising articles, the 18 different provisions in the contract. It seems to me that would be part and parcel of our workshop. That just seems to make sense, in terms of revamp. If there's revamping to be done on those 18 items, that would seem to be the logical place to do it. I don't know how you feel about that, Bill, but
Councilman Carlson.
I'm fine with that. The more discussion we have on any of this stuff is fine with me. My main objection to that list is that it's very real estate focused. And what I've done in the draft that we're working on is just set up like 6 or 8 buckets of things that we could do. Right now, it looks almost like a scope of work, right, and it's more limiting. And what I'd rather do is put the buckets to make it kind of less limiting, and to make it on the surface look like it's less focused on real estate. But if you all, as they come back, you all can give feedback to them, or we can discuss it in the workshop. Up to you.
Then first, let's do this. Would anybody like to make a motion to have a workshop on October 28th at a certain time?
I'll move that, and also a request that staff include those 18 items somewhere within that discussion.
That's going to be a separate issue. For now, for a motion, because Councilman Carlson made a motion to move it to the 24th.
Oh, the 24th?
14th, excuse me, the 14th of November.
That was before you got here.
That's before you got here, John.
They weren't ready. Sorry.
Go, Councilman Carlson.
Yeah,
please.
sorry. They weren't ready with the proposal yet. So we just asked to move it to November 14th. But I'm okay if you want to move it to the 28th.
So Councilman Dingfelder, if you'd like to make a motion for the 28th.
Okay, I'd like us to have the workshop on the 28th.
At what time?
9 a.m.
If I may, I think the clerk wanted to interject. One thing that you need to be aware of, that we do need to provide notice of the workshop. We do need to ensure that it's recorded. We do need to make it open to the public to attend, not necessarily to participate. So I think what I was going to suggest was that the motion include language requiring the staff to coordinate this with the clerk's office, unless the clerk's office wanted to interject something now.
No, ma'am. Jim Cruz, City Clerk's Office. Just wanted to point out that the workshop date is the 24th, not the 28th. 24th of October.
No.
This is this is a different workshop.
Different one.
This is a standalone recommendation.
Okay, so this would be for a special called workshop on Monday, the 28th.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
John, if you wouldn't, excuse me, Councilman Dingfelder, if you'd like to go ahead and make that motion with specific.
Correct, and incorporating Ms. Zellman's suggestions or recommendations about obviously about proper notice via the clerk's office, and also coordination with CCTV, et cetera.
We have a motion duly made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
So
All
Mr.
right.
The motion carried. Jim Crew, City Clerk's Office. May I clarify, that is for item 3 on today's agenda to be included in the special workshop on Monday, October 28th.
No, we didn't get to item
No, we didn't
3 yet.
We didn't get, and I was going to ask Councilman Carlson if he doesn't mind either rescinding his motion or making the motion to include item agenda 3 to the 28th.
Can I just say one thing?
Surely.
I listened to what you said a few minutes ago about the CACs, and I just so everybody listening knows, I think it's very important to listen to the community. It's my business to engage the community on issues, and so I definitely think we should listen to the community and what they have to say. With that in mind, could we, clerk or somebody specifically invite all the CAC members of all the districts? I don't know if that's allowed for Sunshine, but if we're allowed to invite all of them, I think they should listen to the process. I know some folks have been watching from the outside and they're worried that we're going to step on them in some way, but it's open to the public, so whoever could come would be great, and if we could specifically invite them. No?
I have no problem with it. Chief Bennett, do you have a problem with it? Is there any legal reason why we couldn't have it? It is a public meeting.
Let me just back up 1 minute. Councilman Dingfelder or Board Member Dingfelder mentioned something about CCTV. The workshop does not need to be televised. We just need to have minutes recorded, and that's something that you may want to discuss. I think the staff concept was to have this at an off-site location, be a little bit more casual, a little bit more ability to have dialogue. In terms of whether you can it will be open to the public. Again, I think the purpose of the meeting was not to engage with the public, but certainly they can attend and listen, if that's the answer to Councilman Carlson's question.
Ms. Selman, we are going to hold it in council chambers if it's available, correct?
That is your choice. I think the staff was suggesting an off-site location.
It's the wishes of the board, but we were going to recommend a kind of a workshop setting where we would all have table, whiteboards, all those kind of things to facilitate it.
We can do that. 3 of the members here, we did it in our charter review.
We
had whiteboards all set up, and
we can absolutely.
and legal was here. We had
can
someone
absolutely
taking
do
minutes.
it. Yeah, absolutely. If
I would
that's your
prefer
wish.
it to be in chambers.
That's fine. That's easy. Then we have the space. We have everything
Now,
we need.
Mr. Chair,
We good? Councilman Goods.
that's even better for me. I will have to leave at least 1 hour to go next door with a meeting with the mayor and the other black elected officials on that day. But again, if it's here and close, I can be right back within probably 30, 40 minutes of that meeting.
Perfect. Councilman Dingfelder.
Going to Ms. Zellman's comment, if it's here, my preference would be that it is televised, if that's feasible. I know, they might have something else going on, and I can live with that, but if they're available, if it's feasible, it doesn't have to be necessarily broadcast live, per se, but I think at some point, I think it's good for the community, just to see that we're having some very, very serious discussions about very serious issues. So,
Videotape for further time. Doesn't necessarily have to be live.
No.
Mr. Chairman, Jim Crew, City Clerk's Office. The motion appears to have been included in pieces in our discussion. I would ask that the motion be stated in its entirety for the record.
Thank you. Councilman Dingfelder.
It's a moving motion. Right, just that this body hold a special call workshop on the 28th. It's 9 a.m. Okay with council?
Yes.
Fine with me.
Okay. Beginning at 9 a.m., anticipated for 3 or 4 hours. That the items that Michelle presented be discussed, as well as the 18 contract list, 18 item list in the contract be included, and if possible, that CTV would, at a minimum, record the meeting, and that the clerk and our legal counsel make sure that this is properly noticed according to statute, et cetera.
Thank you. And the motion, I believe, was already adopted, or is this an amended motion?
This will be an amended motion. Is everybody in favor with that? Say aye.
Aye. But so who's the second?
Councilman Carlson.
Okay.
Should we,
Thank you.
you had originally had suggested maybe 2 sessions. Should we cap this one and make it 9 to 12 and then set up another one, whether we need it or not? At least we could put it on the calendar.
We can adapt the agenda to that, to a 3-hour session if you'd like.
What time do you have?
Should we go ahead and set up a second one or not?
Shall we see where, after the first one, how far we get?
We could start looking at dates, and,
Okay, could you
and
bring
then
that to us
we could propose those
by the
dates at the
28th?
workshop, if that makes sense.
So, Mr. Chair, I would like to withdraw the motion to move item number 3 to November 14th, and instead ask that item number 3 be included in the agenda for the 28th.
Is that your motion?
Second.
I hear a second from Councilman Dingfelder. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Does that clear that up, gentlemen? Except I will purchase lunch on that day, on Monday, the 28th. I'm probably going to get some sort of wonderful, delicious chicken with maybe yellow rice and beans, or maybe something different this time. Councilman Goods, can you make sure that that is done?
We can make sure it's done.
Thank you very much. And please tell the chef I said thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, one more thing for the record. I believe it was stated October 28th at one point or another. Someone may have said November 28th, but this workshop is for October 28th at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Yes. Ms. Van Loan.
Sorry, I'm still a little queasy of all that talk about needles. Do we have anything else on this item, or are you ready for facade discussion?
I think we're good.
Thank you, Ms. Van Loan.
Wonderful. If we can add the PowerPoint for the facade. So again, we're responding to a couple of motions made by our CRA board.
And now we're on agenda 5.
Agenda number 5.
Thank you.
We had 2 different motions that all involve the facade grant, an initial motion by Councilman Carlson and a second motion by Councilman Dingfelter. Each motion also seemed to have 2 parts, so we've divided our report back to address each of these 4 parts of your motions. So the first part, and the easiest part to address, as mentioned earlier when Courtney was up here, was that earlier in the spring, the facade grant program had been amended to allow a grant only every 2 years by an owner. It originally had been 12 months. The original thought behind that was to make sure that we were spreading it around and being equal opportunity, and that has had some pushback. We have brought all of these items to our respective CACs with the CRAs that have the facade grant program. Everyone is okay with going back to the 12 months, and the EBOR CAC did actually make a motion to request that CRA board revert that time limitation from 24 months back to 12 months. The other CRAs are okay with that. So far, it really doesn't affect them, as they have not had anyone apply 2 years in a row, but they have no objection to that.
Would you like us to make a motion at this time, Ms. Van Loan?
It would be fairly easy if we take these in 4 steps. That'd be great.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we revert back to the 12-month process for the facade grant with all the CRAs.
We have a motion made.
Question on the motion.
Let's get to comments. 1 second. Motion duly made by Councilman Goods, seconded by Councilman Carlson. Any discussion? Councilman Dingfelder.
Question on the motion. We have a detailed facade grant program document behind there. Is this amending a specific provision that we need to make reference to? Do our rules already speak to the 24 months and we're amending that? Tell us what we're amending so everybody's on the same page.
Within the facade grant program guide, we would change the 24 months to 12 months.
Okay,
so it would just be that number.
That's a specific provision somewhere
Yes.
in that document. All right, I'm comfortable with it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all in favor, any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
All right. The second issue that we had was brought up of should we raise the funding limit, which is at currently $50,000, and the facade grant for historic structures on the historic register or run by nonprofits on these historic buildings. So when we went back to all of our CACs and talked and looked at what structures would qualify, there's only a handful of structures that would actually fall under this category. Some of the CACs did have concerns about an individual CRA's ability to fund a facade grant as a right at $100,000 or $150,000, meaning that if you raise the limit within this program to $100,000 or $150,000, some of the CRAs in any given year only have $100,000 for the entire program for all applicants. So as a right to say that they now have that limit was very concerning to some of the CACs. The EBOR CAC reviewed this issue as it was brought up specifically regarding some of the structures within the EBOR CRA, and they have referred it, their CAC referred it to their Planning and Infrastructure and Economic Development Subcommittee. They are requesting that this issue be tabled for November so that they can have the time to do their due diligence, research what the needs are and what the effects on their facade grant program would be. And so as staff responding back from our CACs, we're requesting that EBOR CAC be given the time to do their due diligence regarding this and come back with a recommendation. The other CACs are not in favor of raising that limit again as a right, and we'll talk a little bit more about historic structures separately, since there was another part of the motions that addressed with historic aspects of it. But specifically with the concept of raising limits, EBOR is looking at that, and again, that does raise a lot of concerns for the other CACs who don't have that kind of funding on an annual basis if we make it an automatic right within the program.
Councilman Miranda.
I have some thoughts on it. Calculating real quickly as I started. What is a nonprofit? And who owns a nonprofit if there's no title to one person or one entity? Is it a group of people? And what happens if the nonprofit ceases? Who owns the property? Where do the dividends go to? I'm just asking that as a general. I don't know.
And for the facade grant program.
No. Aside from the facade program, legally, let's say we are a nonprofit here. And all of a sudden we want to stop the nonprofit. What happens to the building that we own? Where does the money go to? I don't know. See, it's all about money somewhere, somehow. It's all about money. Where does the money go to? To the people who are on the board of the nonprofit? I don't know.
For our purposes, your money has gone into the building.
I understand that.
Right.
But the building is now, the owner is a nonprofit. Not you, not the people in the audience, a nonprofit. What happens if we cease as a nonprofit and the building, this city hall, let's say the city hall, is going to be sold? Where did the money go to? The general public or the directors of the nonprofit? I'm not a lawyer. There's lawyers here, there's lawyers everywhere. I must have stunned them.
I guess our hesitation is that in a big picture, we still are under the facade grant. I know you're taking it bigger than that.
I'm a little picture guy. I understand what you're saying from the board perspective. I'm asking a legal question. If that board ceases and the property is sold, where does the money go to?
Would you look? I would say, I don't want to give you a legal opinion off the.
No, I'm not asking for a legal opinion.
Yeah, nonprofits are a creation of federal tax law, and then there are state real estate laws that would govern the disposition of property. If you'd like us to do a report on that question,
I would appreciate to have my one cell satisfied in my brain.
So are you making a motion for us to do a report?
I would like to put that in a motion in a way how you can put it that if this building is owned by a nonprofit, because you've been taking care of it, and all of a sudden you get a facade grant, you do it, whatever, and for whatever reason, the nonprofit so happens that they all become deceased in one day. They all have a massive heart attack. Not us, of course. What happens? Who owns a building and where does the money go to? I want to solve a problem before it happens.
We have a motion duly made and seconded. Any discussion?
Just a few thoughts.
Good.
For example, like the Sons of Italy Lodge is a nonprofit.
Whatever.
Once the membership drops below a certain number and not enough people show up because it's a big, it's a big place, the Grand Lodge would take over that property. We couldn't sell it as a nonprofit and pocket the money as board members. It goes up to a higher authority, which is the Grand Lodge, and that.
I don't know that. You might. I don't.
But your question is, if you are, if it's City Hall is the building that the nonprofit.
Well, I'm just using it as an example, Mr. Maniscalco.
See, I don't know if it goes to the state, if it goes to.
I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question. I don't have an answer.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Yeah.
All right, we have a motion duly made and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, is that for a staff report for the agenda or
Yeah,
just
whatever.
for next month?
You want to come
November?
back at CRA?
Yes, next month,
Yes,
CRA,
CRA,
yes.
yes.
November 14th, thank you.
So are you asking us to table the second decision and wait until you have more information and bring it back at our next CRA meeting?
Yes, to give the EBOR folks time to respond, yes.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Yes, since I raised this, let me help out a little bit. So I'd like to limit this to the EBOR CRA and this discussion and definitely table it. Heck, I'll give them an extra month, table it till they can come back in December. Give you all plenty of time to address it.
Do you have a date for December, Councilman Dingfelder?
Do you have a date for December, Mr. Clerk?
That would be December 12th?
December 12th, correct.
Okay. If the motion's clear, just a request that the EBOR CAC get back to us with its recommendation on this and not bother the other CACs about this issue.
Thank you.
Do I have a second? Second. Motion duly made by Councilman Dingfelder, seconded by Councilman Carlson. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, and the PowerPoint? So the third part of your two motions was to discuss possibly limiting the facade grant program to an eligibility criteria of historic properties only. And again, we took this back to all of our respective CACs. West Tampa, as a new CRA, is not requesting any changes be made to the program. They have had 3 or 4 approvals to date. Some of them have been older buildings. Some of them have just been historic, but they have a mix of both of those types of buildings that they would like to see get upgraded in their community. So they are requesting no changes be made for them for the next year. They'd like to see how the program continues to work. And they do have a priority for all types of buildings within the West Tampa CRA, not just historic ones. With Drew Park, you would basically eliminate the facade grant program for the Drew Park CRA if it has a historic limitation. So if the CRA board so chooses to not have the facade grant program in Drew Park, that is your will. Otherwise, they are requesting for it to remain as is. Almost the same response for East Tampa on this. There are a few historic structures, but the vast majority of structures in East Tampa that have come under the facade grant and been improved through the facade grant program have not been what you would call historic structures. They're older, they are aging, they have needed upgrading, they affect the aesthetics of the corridor and the streets that they are on, but they are not a historic structure. So I'm sort of doing this in parts, going through the various CACs. And to give you an example, on your left, that is a Drew Park building. Obviously not a historic structure, but you can see the changes that were made in Drew Park because of the facade grant program. Also in Drew Park is the one on the right, and what they were able to do, taking down the concertina razor wire at their fencing, being able to enclose in and cover up that really old stucco, address water intrusion on their building. So these are the kinds of improvements they're receiving in Drew Park because of the facade grant program. This is in East Tampa. The building on the left, The gray one, that's what faces the NFL Yet Center on Lake Avenue. Again, not a historic structure. All those cars you saw there originally, that was what was happening every day. They are not part of the business or the employees that work there. These were people who just were parking, hanging out underneath that canopy. It was an old deteriorated canopy from way back when the building was first built. And with the facade program, this back of the property had no impact on the business itself. It had an incredible impact on the community. So with the facade grant program, the owner cleaned up that whole back, took off that canopy so that it did not incent people to come and loiter there. You can see the cars are no longer parked there. And when you're at the entrance to the NFL Yet Center, this is now what you look at is the nice landscaping and drive up, and not all of that other stuff that they had been a few years ago. On the right-hand side was another structure on North 29th Street, not far from Lake. Again, older, aging building, not historic, but now able to have a much nicer upgrade, attract businesses, and be better for its tenants. So these are the kinds of improvements we're seeing on non-historic structures. So in Ybor, it would have very little effect. If you use the criteria of are the buildings on the contributing structure list, the vast majority in Ybor would be on that list and would qualify. So Ybor, again, doesn't have much of an impact one way or another if you did add a historic limit to the facade grant program. In downtown, downtown is a new CRA added to this. There's been some discussion about why is downtown even involved in the facade grant program. So I just want to make a reminder, for downtown, high-rises are not able to apply for the facade grant, and it is limited to the buildings north of Kennedy. And in case you're not familiar with or driven those streets recently, we have a lot of buildings on the north side of the downtown CRA that are some of these older aging structures that could use an upgrade, and the CAC for downtown felt that they wanted to make those incentives available so that everything doesn't just get raised and replaced with high-rises. For some of these buildings, these building owners should have the opportunity to help upgrade and modernize their building and maintain their smaller structures within downtown. So that was some of the thinking behind the downtown CRA. So lastly, we are asking that the historic limitation not be added to the facade program. If it is, we just wanted to make sure that everyone understood what the implications are to the program as a whole. Additionally, we do have historic programs that our business owners and nonprofits can take advantage of. I just want to give you one example. There's a historic structure in Ybor. They were awarded a $50,000 facade grant. They have received $135,000 from the city of Tampa as an interstate historic trust. They have received another $1.1 million in county grants for historic structures, and they've received another $1.5 million for the state for historic structures. So as a CRA board, you can create the facade grant into a historic structure program. You can create a separate historic structure program or leave as is.
Councilman Carlson.
I think you all know my opinion on facade grants. Although all this looks great, if you take the 1.1 million, I forgot the number that we spent on facade grants, if we take in the context of what else we could spend the money on, I think if we looked at it as among the other programs, we wouldn't prioritize this, and we can talk about this on the 28th. But knowing that it's going to be probably a 6-1 vote, I would like to make a motion that we restrict the facade grants to be for historic buildings only. Do I even have a second?
Councilman Moran.
Let me speak to that if I may, and I appreciate it. And anybody's decision that's different from mine, I appreciate them because they may be right. You know what I mean? I can't always be right. However, when you go into an area that's blighted, that's what these things are supposed to be, and you incentivize people to do something, sometimes they don't have all the capital, the dinero, the money, what happens? It continues to decay, the whole area. When you start doing something and putting 20, 25,000, 5,000, sounds like a lot of money. You go buy wood, or you go buy plaster, or you go buy somebody to do it for you. You don't know what money is. You go buy tile, it's $3.95 a square foot. You say, oh, that's cheap when you're looking at 1 square foot. Now you do 1,000 of them square foot. How much is it? $4,000. Now that 1 square foot became $4,000. You don't know what it costs until you start doing, especially on historic structures. And in historic structures, usually they get money from different areas, including the state, including individuals that form these corporations. That's beautiful. It's got to be uniformly spread across. You cannot have it just for one area. You can't say, yes, I'm going to do it for everything on Main Street, or everything on Cypress, or everything on North Boulevard. You can't do that. It's got to be for an area where the money goes into and is dispersed. If you look at Drew Park, if I ask you to show me a picture of Drew Park 20 years ago to now, you say this is the same area. It doesn't even look alike. There was an article in the paper today on Cargo Road and Osborne. I had to stop for a minute because I read it at 4:30 in the morning. On Cargo Road and Osborne, some company's going to move in, have like 100 new employees. Guess what happened just the other day, right around that corner? You go on Cargo Road and you go to Hesperdes, which is the road just east of Cargo Road. Look at all the buildings that have been done with private capital, most of them. Look at the one on the corner, Osborne and Hesperdes. I was just there the other day with the mayor and Congresswoman Castor in a ribbon cutting. Got a building that was so dirty, so infested, that thick, and acid and everything on the floor. He himself cleaned the floor. He himself did it all, most of it. It's an art gallery. Beautiful. Put a nice fence, put decorative trees around it, put a sidewalk around it. What are we talking about? You going to leave it alone? Even us human beings go get a tune-up every 6 months at the doctor's office. So what are we talking about? How are you not going to solve that? Your tires get bald, you're going to keep using them. You ain't going too far. Your roof is leaking, and you're not going to turn off the water in the front because you just want to use it. You got a roofing leak and you're spending more water. Things like that don't match. So what we're trying to do is solve a problem, and the problem is for real. And if you don't attack that problem in the low level, see, you got to stop a problem before it becomes big. And all these problems we're talking about are big. If not, there wouldn't be a CRA. So you try to help out individuals so that you get people induced in doing something. That's all I'm saying, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Councilman Dean, followed by Councilman Goode.
Thank you. I'm going to second Ms. Carlson's motion. Out of courtesy and respect, don't support the motion, but I'm going to second it for purposes of discussion and a vote, because I think everybody deserves that. I was just refreshing my memory about that broken windows theory. Broken windows theory came out in 1982, and basically it's been a popular theory in the world of criminology. To basically say if you leave windows broken, if you allow graffiti to take over a neighborhood, then it can encourage crime and that sort of thing. And I think that in many ways this city has responded to those issues, and we've painted over graffiti and we've tried to get people to fix their windows through code enforcement, and our chairman had a big part in that. But with that said, I think this is sort of hand in hand with that, and that's why I support the facade program. I think that if it's our job as a CRA to improve an area, then I think that if we can help people with up to $50,000, sometimes it's less, and they put in their own money as well. And you always show us, we put in 25, they put in 100 or whatever it is. There's a lot of matching money coming from the private sector. So I think the facade program is working. I will continue to have skepticism in the downtown area, but we can discuss that in our workshop. But I will second the motion.
Councilman Goode.
Ms. Fallon, put the East Tampa photo back up for me, please.
Can you bring back up the PowerPoint?
Right there. Gentleman in the top left corner. And Chief of Staff Mike, he'll know this acronym we use, 56. That means that people are meeting. And when it would rain so bad and we couldn't find a place to park, that's old laundry cleaners. And we park underneath that canopy. And that would be the cover for the day. And I remember that building so well because a lot of my programs play at the NFL Yet Center. And we park on that property and guests will come. But again, it came a time that Mr. Randall said it's time to change. And to change the area, they had to beautify it. So if you look at it now, it's a totally different structured building. So I support those kind of community projects because there are a lot of projects in East Tampa, and I don't know what kind of money value this gentleman may have or whoever owns that, but there are other small businesses that don't have the extra capital to do that type of work, to make their block look decent, because perception is reality of some people. If you don't got a good-looking place, well, I don't want to go there. I don't think that place looks too good. So we have to keep these type of programs in place to help those. I wish the program had a little different criteria. We can't make everything perfect, because some people are with their business, paycheck to paycheck with their business, month to month with their business, and for them to try to come up with this extra capital to match our capital, it's challenging. It is challenging. So that's why sometimes you stay in that rut and you can't get out. Every program isn't perfect. Maybe in the future we can look at fixing a little bit of that to help those who just need a little help versus people that may have some capital can get over that hump. But I always have to look at those who can't help themselves sometimes, that are really struggling at the bottom. So we may have to look at that in the future. We can't solve everything today, but I want us to get that in our mindset of looking at those who really at the bottom need that capital and they just need a helping hand. But I support the SPARD program.
Councilman Miranda.
Well, thank you, but I remember the broken window theory. It was brought up. I think Mayor Giuliani started talking about that. Look what it got him.
Councilman Carlson.
I would ask staff when we're doing the strategic planning, could you make at least a half hour of it just a prioritization of the buckets of things that we spend money on in CRAs? I mean, looking at 163, looking at all the other guidelines, but let's look at the buckets of things that we spend money on in the CRAs. And I would just like to see what we talk about facade grants out of context. And so it would be interesting to look and see if whatever money you had, if you had a bucket of money, what would be your top 3 priorities that we should spend the money on? An example is Drew Park or East Tampa. If we could spend $100,000 on facade grants, or if we could spend the money on building better sidewalks or beautifying a street or updating parks. The linear park in Drew Park sounds like a great idea, but are there other things that only government can do that we can beautify or help because we have a limited amount of money?
Thank you, Councilman. I would just ask if we did designate that time during the agenda and we did look at where the market share of those funds were going, which I think is a great idea. Could we also map it to the strategic plans that are current to make sure that we connect the dollars to the strategic plans that are currently in existence? Because I think it's important that, that I always look for themes and keywords in these discussions. And I keep coming back to the strategic action plan, the community, and of course the funding that's available to facilitate those. And I think it's a great idea to spend 30 minutes to 45 minutes on what we have been doing as a priority, but I think it also needs to tie back to and the reason is for going forward purposes, because if the strategic action plans are not our guiding post or guidelight for the board to have decision support through the CAC, then that's where the first adaptation should really begin. So that would be my only request, is to tie the funding and priority to the strategic plan back to the workshop to show where the journey has taken us.
Yeah, I think that would be great. The idea is that we just prioritize the buckets and figure out what we should spend money on, and that in the plan should be information back to the CICs, because there's an unlimited number of things we could spend money on. So what should we focus on? And just to use a Charlie-style analogy, one of the things I say when talking about government money is I've been to Tibet and the Tibetan regions of Nepal, and so when the Tibetan monks come here to the Straz Center and play, I'll go listen to them play their horns and chant. But just because I like Tibetan monk music doesn't mean that I think we should spend government money to build a monastery for the Tibetan monks here in Tampa. And so if you use that as an extreme example, there are unlimited things that we could spend money on. So what are the things that we're focused on? What are the things that will give us the most impact for a limited amount of money?
Makes sense. Thank you.
If I may, before Councilman Vieira speaks, but you see, then again, we're implying on what we want the CRAs to do. That's your implication. You have to do what we're telling you to do, and I still feel that the community needs to direct their wants and needs to us, although we have final say. But again, it percolates from the communities, through the communities, to the CRAs, and then back to us. That's all I'm going to say about that. Councilman Vieira.
I'll join in voting no, but I do want to, though, salute Councilman Carlson, because it takes a lot of chutzpah to put up something that you may be the only one on. I mean that. I think that's a great thing there. It goes without saying. I think there can be some common ground in the future. I think Councilman Goods may have touched on this, which is looking at, for some of these facade grants, maybe looking at partial means testing for some of them, so that folks like Councilman Goods mentioned, who can't afford the 50%, for example, setting a few of those aside for those entrepreneurs who maybe don't have those funds with them. That's certainly something we could look at, but I think this is, with all due respect, a one-shoe-fits-all mentality that I can't buy into, but I do salute your chutzpah.
Just one other thing.
Councilman Miranda.
You're never alone when you vote by yourself. Before you got there was no one there, so you made 100% improvement. I've voted more than anybody else on this council. You can go check the record. And I never felt alone.
We don't show us a picture of time. On Facebook,
Because if you're not there, there was no one there, so you made 100% improvement when you got there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other comments? We have a motion duly made by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Dinkfelder. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Do we need roll
The
call on
motion
that?
failed with Goods, Maniscalco, Vieira, Citro, and Miranda voting no.
And Dingfelder voted. What?
It was Carlson and I, yes, everybody else.
No.
Mr. Dingfelder seconded the motion.
Correct.
You
but I
can still
voted
vote
no.
against it.
You can still vote against it.
Okay.
If you make the motion, you
Correction,
can't vote against it.
the motion failed with Dingfelder, Goods, Vieira, Citro, and Miranda voting no.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Van Loan.
If we can go back to the PowerPoint, very last point, and I want to thank Councilman Goods for doing the introduction to our last point. So the last part of Councilman Carlson's motion was, could we look at a needs-based component to the facade grant? This is something that when the program was first originated, it was a very thorough, difficult discussion about the paperwork that would be required in order to prove that you can't afford your part of the project. So the East Tampa CAC did take this on. So they are asking that the existing program remain the same, but to add a needs-based component to it so that you still have the ability to use the existing program, but should you not, as pointed out by two of our council members just now, have that matching fund and still be in a business and in a building that really needs that facelift, and it would greatly affect the neighborhood and your ability to conduct business with the people in the community if the front of your business does not look very inviting. How do you upgrade that? So East Tampa is proposing a additional sort of side program attached onto the facade grant, where the maximum amount of the grant would be $25,000 and it would be zero match. So that would be that second needs-based criteria. And in addition to that, since we're saying that the owner would not be able to afford a match, the funds would be paid then directly to their contractor, since the project owner would not be able to afford to pay for it up front and be reimbursed. and there would be then additional documentation that would be required on the part of the property owner so that we can verify it would be then given on a truly needs-based criteria. So that is the request of East Tampa. If you did want to institute a needs-based component to this facade grant program, this is what East Tampa is recommending.
Councilman Dingfelder.
I was just wanting to get in line, if behind Goods, if you had any comments on this, since.
I'm just glad, I'm just looking at that additional for the painting, waiting for her to give me some information about that painting and signs grant.
We were just giving you a heads up that the East Tampa, separately, they are going after a lot of the non-conforming painting on commercial buildings. Signs are expensive, they don't always have money for signs, and so they do painting of their advertising directly on the building. So the East Tampa CAC is working with code enforcement to start enforcing some of our codes on this issue, but they also want to help support the businesses that do need to advertise what it is that's being sold or serviced within that structure. So East Tampa is in the process of putting together a program similar to the Drew Park Fence program that would help support the businesses to repaint the painted signage they have now and also help support them in getting money to put up a new sign. And each of those are proposed at $2,500 each.
So basically to beautify the community and bring them in compliance with code. I think that's wonderful.
So they'll be coming back to a future date with that.
Councilman Dingfelder.
Yeah, I'm supportive of this. I think it's a neat idea. I had mentioned to council my concern on the flip side of the need issue, and I don't know if y'all address this, Michelle. The flip side being, if folks are very wealthy and happen to own a building that's kind of looking a little disheveled and you know, I don't know, it bothered me a little bit 3-4 months ago when I saw some very wealthy folks with very valuable properties getting the CRA, the $50,000 of CRA money. I voted for it because it was already in the process, and I didn't want to be, a jerk to yank the rug out from underneath. But philosophically, I have a little problem with that, especially in the downtown area or Channelside area. Maybe Ybor. I think one of them was in Ybor. One or two of them was in Ybor. So has that discussion come up? And is that something you want to look at?
It's come up repeatedly because any incentive you have is a double-edged sword. When this program was first instituted, we had a 5-page application. Even though it wasn't needs-based, we were looking at the financials of the property owners. We received very few applications that first year because property owners did not want to share that information with us, regardless of the value of their business and their financial resources. Until we reduced down that application to strictly, can you access matching funds, and that's the only financial information they have to give us, is when the program really took off. The paperwork to prove that you do not have enough money to do a program, even with what's being proposed in East Tampa, there is a concern of who will be willing to produce those documents to show that they do not have the resources for the matching. We're hoping that we will get takers on that and that we'll be able to benefit some of the businesses who are truly in need, but usually there is a reluctance to bring that type of paperwork forward. So the vast majority of our 100, I think we're at about 105 approved facade grants right now, are not what you would look on the face of it to be what you consider fairly well-funded businesses, but it's very difficult to create a universal program across our CRAs that closes that gap so that you don't get those instances without hurting those who truly need it.
I mean, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think it's a good program, and I don't want to kill it on this issue. But this issue does continue to disturb me. So maybe as the year goes on, we can keep thinking about a way to look at this, maybe even ask other jurisdictions how they might handle it if they're doing facades.
We did do that when this came back up due to Councilman Carlson's motion. We did research both in the state of Florida and nationwide, trying to find examples of needs-based programs. And I even called some of the other jurisdictions that were in more at-risk communities and deeply at-risk communities. And most of them, the vast majority, are not doing them. I couldn't find anybody. I'm sure there may be one out there, but after several hours of research, I could not find a facade grant program that was needs-based. Again, the paperwork to prove that you don't have the resources is a real impediment to moving forward with that and to do something to implement it.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm slightly off subject, but I just wanted to compliment staff on the presentations today, and specifically, Michelle, I think your presentation on these 4 issues was great. Thank you.
Before I go to Councilman Carlson, Councilman Dinkfelder, and the rest of the board, there are still 3 seats remaining at the FRA conference that will be here. Tampa is the host city. The 15th, 16th, and 17th, there are 3 tickets.
16, 17, 18.
16, 17, 18, excuse me. There are 3 tickets still available. If you really want to see how other cities do their CRAs and what they do with their monies and how they operate, I strongly urge you to go to that. I personally am going to that. So just throwing that out there. Councilman Carlson.
Did the other CICs give feedback on this?
They gave feedback in the sense that that was not something they wanted to pursue.
Okay.
Just because, again, the difficulty of trying to do it.
Yeah, my issue is the same one as Mr. Dinkfelder's, is that, let's say in Drew Park, there are lots of big companies making investments there, and let's say we have a multi-billion-dollar company coming in, building a big facility, we're gonna be $50,000 just to subsidize their building, when we could be using that $50,000 for an affordable home. And I just don't see why we would spend any money. If it, I don't like economic development subsidies, period, but if we make a decision to subsidize a big company, we should make that decision outside of a facade grant. We should do it as part of an economic development process to attract or retain a company, not to just provide this money that could be used for affordable housing or some other priority of the community.
Councilman Miranda.
One side, now the other side. I don't think anyone should be left out, because if that building, let's say it's a $3 million building, wasn't there, your tax base would go to hell. So you gotta help everybody to have something available for everybody. You just can't say, I want those under 50,000 or 20,000. You're gonna get to that, you're not gonna get anything done because there's no money left. You gotta have areas that produce money, to have money, to do what you need to do. It doesn't work in any other way. You can't be a centrist. You gotta be an opportunity for all. You cannot say, because you have money, or you think you have money, you might have a $3 million loan. Doesn't mean you got a $3 million building, that you got $3 million in the bank. That means you owe $3 million to the bank, just like somebody owes $150,000, $200,000 for a house. It's the same thing. Whether you're rich or you're not rich, whether you have money or you don't have money, if you live in that district and you're participating, you're entitled to every benefit that that district has, set by the CEC or the Board of Directors or the CRAs of that area. That's my just feeling. Thank you, Chairman.
Councilman Goods.
You know, both points are taken well. You know, it's the tip dollars of the district, so everyone is entitled. But then you look and say someone really does have the money, why can't they fix their place up? But again, everyone is entitled. It's what I call filling the gap. When we did the pipes program, we up to the 50% because we wanted to make sure everyone fit in a groove and no one fell in the gap. So I think with this that you just introduced, what I talked about earlier, is a perfect example of filling the gap, because I know for a fact that there's some people who wish they had the money to do the extra, but they just don't have to do, and they're keeping their business open week to week, month to month, just alone, trying to buy the products to keep it going, and they don't have the extra capital really to do the work on a major project on the building. So I'm glad that you introduced this to us. Thank you, Michelle, for your work.
Ms. Fenlon.
I just want to add that as staff, Brenda and I, who primarily oversee all of these programs, we are always working with our businesses. There isn't any of these 105 that Brenda and I haven't touched. From the very beginning, both of us have been implementing this program. And we are always listening to our businesses, working with our businesses to how to tweak it. And over the years, we have come back to CRA board to tweak language here. We've worked with our attorneys over the years, whether it was Sal or Jorge and now Andrea. How do we tweak this program to make it better, to tighten it up, and to make it usable and get the results we're looking for? And we remain open to ideas. Brenda and I are involved across the state. We are in regular contact with other CRAs across the state and their programs, and we get a lot of phone calls about how our programs work, and the FRA recommends and refers a lot of people to us when CRAs are looking to establish facade grant programs as to how we operate. So, but I didn't want to make it sound like we are shutting down discussion or we're not open, and we continue to review this as it is a challenge for us also.
Do you need a motion made on this?
If that is your pleasure.
Mr. Chair,
It's a pleasure of the board.
I'll make a motion to entertain the facade grant for the East Tampa project.
Second.
Any more clarity on that, or?
I'm just going by her grant. I mean, basically, it's need-based tiers.
Motion's duly made by Councilman Good, seconded by by Councilman Miranda. Any discussion?
Just to be clear, are you asking that they add this need-based element to their East Tampa facade grant program?
That'd be correct. Okay, well, we're going to go and clarify that they add the need-based tier assessment for the facade grant for East Tampa.
Second, yeah.
Motion still stands, still second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, before you go to public comment.
Hang on, Ms. Van Loan, do you have anything you'd like to finish with?
I'm all done. Thank you if you're done with me.
Thank you, Ms. Van Loan.
Thank
Councilman
you.
Goods.
Before we move on to public comment, I'd like to go back to number 2, if you mind, for a moment with the monthly CRA report activities, please, sir. I think Mr. Rosner is here. You come up, probably Chief of Staff and Mr. Johnson. I had asked last time about Kid Mason.
Yes.
And I didn't see that in the report. Still looking for an update on that. I know the Chief of Staff, we've got this $400,000 that Mr. Chairman of our City Council kind of pushed for reference to our park improvements and so forth. And I want to make sure that we had talked previously before that motion was even made in reference to Kid Mason. Where are we at with that? Because I know there's some issues there, and I know that it's already gone to the downtown CEC board that talked about that. So I just need to know where we at with that, so we can be moving forward, because I know it's needed over there.
I've been in communication with Brad Suter at the Parks Department, and he believes that there's more work to be done to identify the specifics. And we'll be meeting with the person that runs that facility on the 21st or 22nd. We were just getting emails to find a date to meet and outline in very specific format and go through that. We did an initial assessment a few weeks before the last meeting, but they've been looking at it in more detail. So the person who's in charge of that, I don't recall his name.
Well, I want to make sure that we also preserve that back wall that has all our founders of that Central Avenue on there. On
Yeah, that just got done about 2 years ago.
Freshen that up, making sure that people see that it's really preserved. So as we get more information, please enlighten us from the CRA board about that, because with that downtown CRA, they have the funds to get things done, and we need to get that moving.
Okay,
thank you, sir. Mr. Johnson, Chief Staff. Mr. Johnson? Chief, I know we talk about strategic plans, and Mr. Johnson gave his presentation. You talked about strategic plan criteria. I want to make sure that we do look at the strategic plan. I know the Fair Oaks Park has been an issue. I want to make sure it's been, since '09, we're going to 220. I want to make sure that the CAC board knows about the situation about the Fair Oaks Park, and that we're moving forward to try to rectify the issues. I went down there several times. I met with the president of that association, the East Hillsborough Association. I know that was an infestation of some rats and some other things in that building. a while ago. I'm hearing that it's still going on. So we need to look in that right away if that's the case. And I know that it was in the plan. I didn't really know about that coming on board. Now I'm on board. I'm hearing about that from community. I want to make sure we address that Fair Oaks issue since it's been in the plan since '09. That's a long time to have been in the plan, and now it's going on 220 and nothing's been done. We need to try to move forward on that project. Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnson, any issue on that?
Yeah, as it relates to Fair Oaks?
Yes, sir.
Yes. In previous years, Fair Oaks Community Center was looked at as a potential for rehabilitation, because as you know, in our East Tampa redevelopment plan, there was specific language that was mentioned by the community when that plan was developed, that we spend tax increment dollars on rehabbing existing facilities within our footprint versus building new structures. And Fair Oaks was one of the very first that was brought to the attention of the advisory committee back at that time frame. And there was movement by our Parks and Recreation Department to plan for the rehabilitation or actually eliminating or tearing it down and rebuilding that structure. And from time to time, it was in the budget, and then it was removed from the budget for other priorities that were given to other requests for funding out of the General Revenue Fund. So it never came back. However, in my conversation with the Director of Parks and Recreation, he's informed me that they did make substantial improvements to Fair Oaks from a rehabilitation standpoint to try to clear up some of those outstanding issues that you pointed out that were negative into that facility. So as far as today goes, the facility is, from the Parks and Recreation Director standpoint, the facility is adequate for what's being used there right at the present time. But it was a priority for the community to have Fair Oaks to be expanded, because at that time of the discussion, Fair Oaks was handling a very large number of youth after school in their programs, and they were just busting at the seams. So the idea was that they were going to design a new facility and potentially tear the old one down and build a new one. But there again, priorities in the general revenue budget moved that project for some other priority.
Well, since that is in the plan, let's make sure that the CEC board knows about it. Let's move forward. You know, there are dollars there, there are interest dollars there, so we need to look at if the general budget can't do it, we need to look at us doing it because it was in there, it was a priority, and I think the CEC board is aware of that project as well. So let's just make sure that the community at large know that we're working on these issues one step at a time, and now that I'm going to be pushing the envelope to make sure that we get things put in the envelope, okay?
Yep,
Thank you,
very
sir.
much so.
All right, let's move on to public comment. Please remember you have 3 minutes for your public comment. If I could just see a show of hands of how many people are going to be here for public comment. Could you please line up my left, your right? Prepare for public comment, if you can. Ms. Fenton, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Jeanette LaRussa Fenton. I am very proud to be here representing the West Tampa Chamber of Commerce. Good morning, Mr. Chair and all of the board members. We want to first thank you so much for this CRA board's support of the upcoming Flavor of West Tampa event. We received a very generous $5,000 grant that is going to help greatly toward that event, toward the city costs that are associated with it. So we thank you very much. I also want to thank Mr. Kiner, the staff, and the West Tampa CAC for their strong support. Now the fun part, the Flavor of West Tampa. Mark your calendars, Sunday, November 10th, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. We are at a brand new facility at Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park. It's going to be spectacular. We are going to have everything that you can imagine. Many of you remember that we had the Flavor of West Tampa for about 7 years, and we took a hiatus for several years. And now we're back, hopefully bigger and better than ever. And we have a new twist. This year it is Flavor of West Tampa, sangria, and cigars. So in addition to all of the food from the iconic West Tampa restaurants, we have about 18 of them. There's something to meet every palate. We will have sangria, we'll have cigars. This is a family-friendly event. We'll have a children's area. We'll have business expo. It is a free event, and I want to emphasize that because there's going to be something that can be enjoyed by all. Of course, the food and beverages will be for sale, but other than that, everything is free. Another new thing this year is that we will have a domino tournament. So yes, I am talking to you, Councilman Miranda. I know you're... But there will be a domino tournament, so we encourage everyone to sign up for that. And another thing I want to relay is that this is a fantastic opportunity to showcase West Tampa, our history, and our culture. But in addition, the proceeds for this will benefit the Judeo-Christian Health Clinic. So the West Tampa Chamber is very proud to organize the event and to provide the proceeds to the Judeo-Christian Health Clinic that, as you know, helps those that are medically indigent to receive care that they otherwise would not receive. So we invite you personally to attend, everyone here, the listening audience, and we hope to see you all on Sunday, November 10th, 11 to 4. Thank you again.
Any comments, Ms. Fenton? I just wanted to thank you for bringing this to our attention, and also for your many, many decades of service to this community at the county, at the city, with the CRA, and now in the semi-private sector with the chamber. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Dingfelder.
We look forward to attending.
Thank you, Ms. Fenton. Next, please.
Good morning. It is my greatest pleasure to be here this morning. I was very enlightened with the information I did receive. One of the things I learned in the meeting this morning was that all 8 of the districts are responsible, not just for affordable housing, but for workforce housing. And I am so glad to see that we all realize that this is not going to be a problem that we're going to fix in the next few minutes, the next few months, or the next few years, that this has been a long-standing problem here in Hillsborough County, District 5, and the city of Tampa, and that this is not a one-size-fits-all. I heard explained by some of the council members today that we have very diverse population here in the city of Tampa. We realize this, and so what we hear from EBOR, CRA might not be the same response we get from District 5 where I live. Information tells us, the Census Bureau tells us, that facts speaks for themselves. We understand that the median income of the people that live in District 5 is not going to be reflected as the same as those who live downtown or Channel Side. We understand that the people who live there have been reported that the greatest number of persons entering into the prison system come from District 5, and that these same people are going to come home to District 5. I am so happy to hear that we have a solution, which is going to be workforce housing. We don't have a population we can afford to throw away. These people are going to work at your Burger King, they're going to be at your Walmart, they're going to be at your McDonald's, serving you coffee in restaurants, they're going to be downtown picking up the paper after these special events you have. And they deserve a place to live. We cannot afford to forget there is a class of people who still need somewhere to live. And being that District 5 is that spot, is that place, that zip code 33610, however we want to get around it, we still deserve a place to live. Workforce housing. It is not the $250,000 steel structure you're putting up on Chelsea. It's not the 75 lots you've given to Domain Homes, 220 starting out the gate. And the first-time home buyers program, let's face it, it's only a second mortgage. We have got to accommodate the people who live in these neighborhoods. It says community is the first part of your name. Community redevelopment. If you're going to be community, that means people. So we're going to have to address the needs of the people. I appreciate my 3 minutes, and I thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Did the speaker place her name on the record?
Ma'am, would you mind coming back and giving us your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Carol Ransom.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Ransom.
Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Johnny Johnson. The information I received this morning is the CRA is coming in and the CAC is not reaching the community. you have a couple of people speaking for the masses. A lot of people is not involved with the redevelopment, and it's the economic. For example, you bring in Walmart, and it's supposed to be a full service. It's half service. They got one way in, one way out. The way it's driven. And so when you redeveloping, you have to think about the community in which you're bringing these businesses in and setting them down in there. It's still an economic-based system where we are getting, for example, the CAC and the CRA, with the FDOT, y'all was going to close down Florida, Nebraska. That wasn't the voice of the people. It was the voice of a small group of people thinking they're doing the best for the overall group of the community, and especially in District 5. We have to understand that, again, everybody is to be accounted for. And we elected you guys to speak on and move on our behalf, in which we're not. Again, the CRA, the community redevelopment, are only thinking about, I feel, and the community feel, is the businesses. The CAC is not communicating with the masses of the community and the constituents, so they really don't know what's going on. And when something's redeveloped, the people in the community is like at hour or at wow, because they had no idea, well, the Publix was going down on China side, this was going on over here, because there's a big disconnect. Y'all look good sitting up here when you got your CRA board members coming up telling you what's going on. Again, the community do not know what's going on within their boundaries and their district. I want to know how you guys are going to fix that so that everyone can't come down here and be in this meeting to find out what's going on. And publicizing it on television is not good enough. It should be some way where the CAC is holding a mass meeting, the library or school or something, where people can make these meetings and know what you guys are redeveloping instead of something being sprung up on them. Every time in my community, it's just a spring up. Oh man, I didn't know that. And again, with a lot of the weed dispensary and stuff that's going on, a lot of people in the community do not want a lot of things that you guys are calling redevelopment. It's not good for the community to be blindsided and takes their money being spent and develop things that they really don't want in their community. And again, what are you guys going to do about the big disconnect between the community and the city and what's going around as a overall? Because again, Hillsborough County is an umbrella. Shouldn't have to travel far out to get good businesses, and you're bringing businesses into the community that's not really serving it. Again, you need to really look at Walmart on 15th in Hillsborough. It's on 19th in Hillsborough. You bring it in, but it's not a full service. It's half a service, and it's taking taxpayers' money.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis.
Good morning, Yvette Lewis. You want my address? Okay, thank you. I come to you this morning on a couple of topics. First of all, affordable housing is just that, the word, affordable. Affordable housing to you is something totally different for someone who has a very minimal income and trying to survive. So when you're looking at private developments coming into East Tampa, I need you to look at someone who's really actually going to do some housing that we can afford. $240,000 and $280,000 is not affordable housing, okay, if I'm working at Burger King or McDonald's or even if I'm a teacher's aide. So I want y'all to think about that. Look for a private developer that's really ready to come in and help this community. It can be done. Don't tell me that it can't, because it can. Also, too, let's talk about transparency. The CAC, the East Tampa Revitalization Program, had a meeting the other day. What was it? Wednesday. Tuesday. After that meeting was over, my phone was ringing. We have a serious problem in East Tampa. The CAC is not allowing public comments, not allowing people to speak, not allowing people to come in and sit there and observe. So I want to let you know there is an issue with transparency that's going on in East Tampa, and me, as the president of the NAACP, I am asking y'all to get it under control and clean it up now. I know y'all are voting and talking about a new executive director. When you give him his office space, I want you to give him a broom and send him to East Tampa CAC, East Tampa Revitalization Program, and sweep it up and clean it out, because it's a mess. And I want you to know one thing also. if you put paint on a wall over in Fair Oaks and that wall is infested with rats and roaches, you just got infested paint. Okay? Please understand that. Tear the building down and give those people, matter of fact, hold on, I'm gonna make it personal. Give me a new building. That same swing set, I hate to say, it's the same swing set I was skint up and burnt up on when I was a child playing over there at Fair Oaks. This is a shameful God that I have to continue to come up here and ask y'all folks to fix that park for me. And my baby, I got a 2-year-old. I need your help. I need you to clean up East Tampa, CAC, and I need you to give Fair Oaks Park a brand new facility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Bishop Patty.
morning. My name is Bishop Michelle B. Patty. I'm the pastor of Trinity and Faith Ministry. 90% of my parishioner lives in East Tampa, the other 10% throughout the city. First, I want to thank you all for not voting to block off Florabraska. But however, I'm here, I heard quite a bit, and so I just want to start with prioritizing. We need to know how to prioritize, and that's not being done. I hear you're talking about what the facade need base. It's just like on paper, I can't receive food stamps, but my reality is that I need them. So, but I can't get them. So you can go off of need base. We need to do that. Secondly, we're talking about affordable housing, container homes. I had never seen one until the other day. There's a gentleman, a white gentleman in the hood, in the black neighborhood, who's building a container home, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and it has full service kitchen, a living room, loft. So I think we need to look at that, because at the end of the day, that man would not owe a penny to anyone. You get the property, it's real cheap. Windows, I mean, it's something that you all need to look at. Now, let's go to Fair Oaks. I'm hearing about, once again, prioritizing. 2009, the money was there. The money was taken from there and sent to Davis Island. That's what happened. Councilman Goose, as the representative for District 5, a motion need to be made today that Fair Oaks be prioritized, that they need to get what they need to redo this building, tear it down, fix it up or whatever, because the money was put there. We are taxpayers. We're also super voters out there, and you cannot treat the people like children. You dangle a carrot in their face, say, we're going to give this to you. You snatch it, and you take it over Davis Island, where people really can pay for whatever service they need over there. So these are things that we should not continue to have to come down here and plead for. Now with the CAC, how are we going to have one that they make the motion, do whatever they have to do, then they allow the public input? That makes no good sense. You need to hear from the public, and Councilman Carson, you've been hitting the nail on the head. You keep saying public input, where here we have no public input. One of the most blighted areas is East Tampa and University of Tampa, but in that area out there, University of South Florida. So the bottom line is, you need to listen at the people who live it, eat it, and it's their reality as to what they need, and not continue to have a handful of selected people who look like me, and you listen at what they say and not the masses of the people who's being pained and going through all the different issues out there. So, Councilman Goose, we're asking that you speak up today, make a motion for the people in Fair Oaks, because we do want the culture center, but I want you to understand that culture center is going to take a while before it's even built. There's a lot of things that has to be put in place for that, but the bottom line, Fair Oaks was on the agenda way back in 2009. It's shameful that now, once again, they are put on the back burner, and you're causing the black community to be divided once again by fighting each other as to what we want over here and what we want over there, when we deserve both of them.
Mr. Chairman, let me speak to that. Ms. Patty, you come back, please. Yes, you made 2 points. Let me get to the CAC, because I sat on that board, and I can tell you, you're right, there needs to be some changes made as it relates to the partnership, the CEC board, and hopefully with the new director coming in, we can kind of get and round this thing together. But I can also tell you this. Those meetings are posted, but we don't get the participation sometimes from our community to come out to the meetings to voice their concerns. What times you get a lot of the presidents of the different associations that do come to the meetings because they have their own private meetings. So when you're having 2 meetings a week and then the associations are having their own meeting, people's times are valuable. So they don't come out to all the meetings, but their representative comes to those meetings and say what their particular association is saying and what they want. That's number one. So hopefully we can do better on that and making sure that we're marketing better. We know we have a problem throughout the city about marketing products and marketing what we do. So I've already talked to the chief of staff when he first came on board as it relates to better marketing in the city on all fronts. As it relates to Fair Oaks, I didn't know about Fair Oaks until the end, until it came about. I understand about the strategic plan. I questioned 2009 to now. And I've questioned that. That should have been done a long time ago. Irregardless if those funds from the general fund were taken and moved someplace else, the TIF dollars should have come in and taken care of that. Point blank, simple. It was in the plan. It should have been done. It has not been done, but I've already you saw me just tell the chief of staff and Mr. Johnson, we need to start looking at that now, not later. So hopefully I'll be getting a staff report back within a couple of weeks or by the end of the month to find out where we're at on that once he goes down there and make an evaluation with Parks and Rec and the chief of staff. So I can make that motion, be happy to, hopefully get a second on that, but I've already instructed staff and Mr. Johnson to look into that at this point.
Solution. Expect that people don't come to the meeting. Why should you come just to be a spectator? 2, let's be transparent. Let's make the motion. If your colleagues go with you or not, let's be as Charlie, and not no disrespect, Councilman Miranda and Councilman Carson. If you are standing alone today, you stand alone. But make a motion that your constituents know how you feel.
You want motions at the end, or can I make that
Let's
motion?
have motions at the end. Let's
Okay.
finish with public comment, please.
Good morning, Connie Burton. It's a labor of love to come down here because on this side of the aisle, most of us are not reaping a paycheck. Mr. Johnson came this morning and he presented the plan for East Tampa and laid out almost $1 million for whether it is first-time ownership or rehab. The East Tampa Partnership has an advisory committee that has a housing committee that's supposed to meet every third Thursday of the month. And I bet you not one sign-in sheet can be provided because the council person that chairs that meeting don't even chair it at his office. I position myself in that community to see if anybody's coming to the meeting. Nobody's coming to the meeting. How are these decisions being made? So right now we find ourselves the CAC versus the community. The meetings are held 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:15 in the morning. They had a meeting, and this is what really brought me down here, because we was at a meeting the other night. And from the audience, it was announced that the CAC of East Tampa has agreed to give $1 million to build a senior facility over at the 18th Street Park. When has the community vetted? When have we had an opportunity to talk about it? But the CAC and that little power group of 7 makes the decisions for the community where we only have input at the very end where everything has been first, second, and closed, all right? So they met on September the 6th. A motion was made by Kim Hedlund to tell the councilwoman to come down here and tell you all, get the minutes and read them, to go down there, Chairman Goodley, and relate to the CRA board, AK City Council, on September the 12th, that we have not discussed the $1 million expense to the CRA for a community center, and that it need to be fully vetted. And 4 days later, another body of the CAC say we're gonna rescind that. 7 people again saying, Councilwoman, you go and tell them in a non-confrontational way, relate to the CRA board that we are willing to put in East Tampa CRA funds to make the senior center happen for the community. We have not had an opportunity to have full transparency and full communication. And let me just add this. The reason I come down here is because I love my community. The reason why I go to the CRA board, because I had been left because it was so full of corruption back in the day. But I'm on this board now by invitation in the community, asked by the chairwoman and you, Orlando, to come, let's make it better. And you know what we are getting? We're still walking in the same crap. And if you don't want full problems in this community, get it under control.
Thank you, Ms. Burton. Mr. DeMaio?
Yes, I want
You
to
have 3 minutes.
Okay, here we go. Victor DeMaio, 4925 Independence Parkway, Suite 195. I'm here representing Malka Isaac. She owns a building in the downtown CRA area, and I'm here because we've had, I'll tell you a story. A few years ago, before most of this board has been here, but when the West Tampa CRA was in the process of being made up, the boundaries came down Howard, Armenia, cut across Cypress, went down Rome, and cut out a huge swath of West Tampa, and including the new Jewish Community Center and other areas. They all came to me and said, could you please see if we could do something about that? Well, at the time, the staff was very belligerent, as they are with me now. They won't talk, they wouldn't give me the time of day. They said, that train's left the station, we ain't changing those lines, they're done. And I said, okay, we'll see. And so I came to the CRA, and those of you remember say, look, you guys are my last resource. This is why you have to have, at one time, your aides worked for the mayor. Your city council attorney worked for the mayor. The staff here doesn't work for you, they work for the mayor. So this is why.
Any attorney that works for the city works for both sides of the government.
I understand that.
I just
Yeah.
want to correct you on that point. You're making hair grow out of my head.
Okay, wow, that's interesting. Yeah. Okay, never mind. My point is this, to be responsive to the person who has a problem, I haven't been able to get to first base until I was able to talk to Mr. Bennett, and to his credit, we had a couple meetings, and he said, let's see what I can do. But my point is this, the Allen Building here, which is next to Massey Park, the Massey Park redevelopment project or fix-up project is a CRA project in North Downtown. And the city's getting ready to spend $1.7 million to fix up that park. Our building is right next to that park. Malka will come up here and explain to you that she was not notified. When I do zonings, as you know, I have to notify the neighbors within 250 feet, have to bring it certified, let you know what's going on. So the problem is this, Malka and Rich McIntyre, her attorney at the time, spoke with Mr. Rosner, and he said, well, anything happens at that park, we'll let you know. Well, they've had 3 meetings. He did not notify her. When I went to the staff and said, why can't we incorporate this project, which as you see here is a beautiful project. She's getting ready to spend $2 million to fix up this building that was built in 1901. Mr. Posner has indicated that several people have come back to us and said, well, that building is going to get torn down. The developer that owns the property surrounding her, he's going to tear down that building and build a beautiful new high-rise, which, like I said in a previous meeting, Tampa's very good about building parking lots where historic buildings used to be. So my issue here is, you see the project, we have a downstairs restaurant that can be fully incorporated with the park, an upstairs top floor restaurant that can incorporate it with the park, and we'd like to see if we could get together and work together and make this a marriage of the park and the building that.
If the board has no problem, I am going to grant Mr. DeMaio another 1 minute. However, Mr. DeMaio, this is the CRA board.
Right, and this is a CRA project.
Please make sure that this pertains to CRA.
Correct.
1 more minute. Make
Okay.
your point, please.
Again, you're right. This is a CRA, the $1.7 million to fix up this park is a CRA project. The CRA is responsible for funding it. Right now, I see this project as this. This is lines on a piece of paper. They haven't done the RFP. They haven't done anything to move this project forward. All we're asking is that we can sit down together, work together. We have a lot of examples of restaurants that work with the parks. We have Fort Greenfields at Curtis Instant Park. We have Big Race Fish Camp at the downtown park. And we have the Ballast Point Park that has a restaurant associated with it. I do not see why we couldn't make this a lovely project with a lovely restaurant associated with a park where the people can enjoy. The biggest problem we have right is I'll try to wrap this up quickly. The plans call for a dog park to be put right next to the restaurant. This, for the first time, this new park is going to have tables and chairs on the opposite end away from the restaurant. All we're asking is to move the dog park and switch them with the tables and chairs, where the tables and chairs can be next to the restaurant, and move the dog park to the other end of the park.
Thank you very much. Stay right there. Councilman Goose.
Mr. Chair, Mr. DeMaio, you said this project is in the CRA zone.
Yes.
Have you gone to the CAC board with this? Have you talked to Mr. Reisner in reference to this?
Mr. Rosner, I've sent him emails. He hasn't responded. My client, Malka Isaac, who is not on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any of the stuff that they said this, where the notice went out, if she doesn't scour the city website where the notices went out, and she can address that herself directly to you. But that's the issue we have here. Mr. Rosner promised her and Mr. McIntyre that she'd be noticed. They weren't noticed. Again,
So
we have an opportunity like we did 3 years ago.
Basically, you're looking to meet with the CAC board, from what I'm understanding. You haven't hadn't had an opportunity to meet with the board.
No, we met.
Reiser?
We did meet with the neighborhood. Go ahead.
Councilman Gooch, hang on 1 second.
Okay.
Are you finished with your
Yeah.
comments?
Yes.
Yeah. Mr. Dingfelder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm familiar with this proposal. It's not at any rezoning stage or anything like that that would preclude us from chatting about it privately. And Mr. DeMaio and I have chatted about it. In the abstract, I think a public-private partnership like this makes great sense. There is precedent for it, as Mr. DeMaio pointed out, with several restaurants adjoining or using our park space to better energize that park space.
Right.
And if she's planning on opening up a restaurant, or her tenant would open up a restaurant, and they can overflow into some park space, I think it makes great sense for 2 reasons. Number one, it energizes the park space, and number 2, it adds a level of security and protection for that park. Because if you recall, 10, 12 years ago, we shut down and fenced off that park because it was basically becoming a homeless shelter area. And as we know, on that end of town, those issues are not solved yet.
Right.
So if we can assist this property owner in getting this going and come up with, obviously, there has to be lots of agreements and documents, and I think Ms. Malka's an attorney herself, lots of legalities associated with this joint venture. Frankly, like I say, in the abstract, I'm not ready to sit here and design this thing, and that's not our role. But I'm wholly supportive of the concept in the abstract, and I would strongly encourage Mr. Rosner and the CAC board to work with these folks.
We did meet with Mr. Mike Penalosa, the head of the neighborhood association, showed him all the things you have in front of you now, and he was blown away. He says, there's nothing in that part of North Downtown we can have breakfast, lunch, and dinner in that area for people who live there and work and play there. They have Mole Restaurant, which used to be Fly Bar, and they've got their Osteria. They're very expensive places. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Councilman Miranda.
I just want to clear my mind up a little bit, because of the 2 points that you brought up, and I'm not disagreeing with you.
Sure.
You talked about the park at Ballast Point, you talked about Curtis Instant Park. If I recall, both of those were sent out for RFPs, and people had to do a due diligence to get what they're at.
Of course,
This is totally
right.
different.
Right.
I want to make sure that that's on the record.
Oh, yes,
that this
absolutely,
is not the same.
absolutely.
I
No,
understand.
you're
Thank
right.
you.
You're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Mr. DeMaio, I'd like to have Mr. Rosner have time for rebuttal. Come on up here, sir.
Good morning. Rob Rosner. I'm the one funding the project for the Herman Massey Park. We had public meetings where all were invited. Deb G.I. is our consultant. Carla Price is our project manager from the Parks Department. and they were directed to keep everybody informed. And those emails went out, and people were invited, and we took roll call at the meetings. And Ms. Malka had a representative at the June meeting, Ms. Rose Petruka, and she specifically said in her comments and written that she was representing Ms. Malka, and that they chose option 2, which had the park in that location and the dog park. And so she's had a say in being at the spot, and has had a representative there saying just that, which had the dog park in that spot. So the response to Curtis Hickson Park, yes, that park was designed with a retail space intended to be rented for a food vendor, and the city owns that property, and it's a leased property. At Big Ray's, same thing, city-owned building, was put out to lease. It was all done in part of it. It's not an outside agency, it's not a neighboring party. It was fully owned, city-owned building that's fully leased. So, any other questions?
Mr. Dingfelder, before we go one step further, I have council attorney here, I have CRA attorney here. Is this a subject for CRA, or is this actually a subject for city council? And do we want to cross the lines on that?
I think it depends on what it is that you're asking us to do. What I'm understanding is the CRA is
We're funding a
involved
park
with
for
the
the
redevelopment of the park.
Yes, and the Parks Department was, charged with programming and upgrading the park to the community's wants and needs, which we set up a longer process for listening to the community and all the neighbors about what they wanted. And this is what the majority had wanted, and this is the one they voted on. And Mr. Paness, I spoke with him as well, and he didn't have the same opinion for what he just shared, but he had a different opinion. He shared with
But
me.
I think it's fair to say the city's lease of park properties within city parks would be done in coordination with the city parks department, and I think to your point, that is more in the nature of a city issue than a CRA issue.
Right.
So.
Councilman Dingfelder.
With all,
Thank you, Ms. Zellman.
I think your point is well taken, Mr. Chairman, and with all due respect to Ms. Zellman, yes, the city owns and runs the park. But like most of our CRA projects, the CRA is funding this. We are funding this. Mm-hmm. We are taking a big part of it, and we have to coordinate with the city when we do this.
Absolutely.
Virtually every major project that you or Ed or the rest of them have are like that.
Right.
So yes, Mr. Chairman, it could be both, but all of these projects straddle the line.
But the original program.
So let me just finish up. Are you beyond the point of no return on your design on this? And I don't know who's making that final decision in terms of the location of Dog Run and also the possibility of sharing some of the space with the adjacent vendor. Are we beyond that point? It didn't sound to me like Massey Park is beyond that point.
We're at 90% plans right now. We're giving final comments for doing that.
90% drawings?
Drawings. We're getting ready to go out to bid. That's what you remember my report. It should be built in the spring.
Well, maybe we should revisit that and slow down.
Well,
that's my comment.
If we had put out that part of the land was supposed to be put out for an RFP, we would have to let all vendors be able to try to lease that space as a competitive nature, just like we did these other ones.
Massey's been unoccupied, vacant for a decade or more. In another couple of months, I don't think will bother anything. But that's just my opinion.
How far out are you wanting to halt this project, Councilman Dingfelder?
It doesn't bother me. Let's do it right. 6 months or a year. Let's do it right. I think that's more important than
we've been down this road. Okay.
Excuse me, Chief Bennett, you're standing there patiently, wanting to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. I was approached on two casual conversations about this, and I was shown some opportunities for what I'll just call a change order, to give it a nickname. I was willing to, with staff, to take a look at the history of where we are today and what the new intention is based on the discussions and redrawings, if you will. All I'm asking is, I haven't had enough time to go through. I have conversation from the city staff side. I heard today the public comments. I've had sidebar comments. I understand and respect Councilman Dingfelder's comments as well as it fits into this project. We do want the right outcome. That's the point I'm trying to make. But I will say that originally the community offered, from what I'm understanding, a desired outcome. It's okay to have a change if, one, the community still agrees with that change, two, that we can afford to have that change, and three, it's an acceptable change all the way around, legally and of course operationally and from a design build point of view. I'm just not there yet.
John,
So,
can I suggest that you come back on the 28th? That would give you 2 weeks to take a
during the
look.
workshop or the
Yeah.
14th in November?
Just as a quick item on the workshop.
I mean, if we want to add that to the workshop, I have no problem.
Well, I just
think
say
we're
that
gonna-
because we're meeting.
Yeah, I think in 2 weeks I could figure out where we are and where we need to go. But again, this is days old in parking lot conversations and hallway conversations so far.
Chief,
Councilman
Chief.
Goods. Chief, Councilman Goods would like to ask you a question.
Good morning.
Let me,
Hang on. Still have questions. That's okay.
you know, me watching city council for a lot of years and being at city council, you know, it's good to have somebody who will bargain, who will listen and will make friends with everybody. And I'm glad you are doing that with this council. I know time is tough, it's city staff sometimes, but we're trying to make everybody happy. Sometimes we can't make everybody 100% happy, but if we can come as close as we can, that'd be good. And I'm glad that you're making the office to come back in a couple of weeks to see if we can come up with some type of resolution to help a historical building that's been there a long time and a possible new business that we're coming to help everybody in the downtown area. So I thank you for that.
No, my pleasure. I think we should be in the business of people helping people. And the outcome of that, to me, the favorable outcome is what is the best use of this, you know, private-public partnership under the CRA realm. So we'll work on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Carlson, Councilman Carlson has.
Just one quick thing, and I don't want to jump into your design, but someone mentioned the possibility of an RFP on this. If that happens, it seems to me that this is different than the other concessions that you all mentioned. The others were concessions that allowed vendors to lease or take over space that was owned by the city to cook and produce food and sell food. It looks to me from the maps that the only space that this vendor is looking for is to put tables. So I don't know if there's another example of that in the city where it seems more like a some of the outdoor restaurants allow. I think the city allows tables and chairs on sidewalks or other public spaces. So it seems to me that it's totally different because they're not asking to put a kitchen or anything else in the public right of way. It's just the tables and chairs.
Ma'am, thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for listening to us. It is not, Mr. Dingfelder, it is not too late. Fortunately, the train has not left the station yet. We can redesign it. My architect, I hired one, will pay for it. And we'll talk to several people in the community. They did not know it was that opportunity. They would love to have it. They were told by Mr. Rosner that I have to knock down, my building is coming down. It's an old building. It's a beautiful building. I want to make it look the way it looked 100 years ago. It will be an amenity to the community. I and my attorney, Richard McIntyre, met with Mr. Rosner about a year ago. Richard McIntyre handed to Mr. Rosner his business card, and Mr. Rosner promised us to let us know what's going on with the park. He did not let us know. I had no idea. I am 83 years old, and I don't get notifications that go on social media. I'm sorry, I don't know to go on social media. I would have been there had I known. The lady he mentioned is not my representative. She was not authorized to speak on my behalf. The only representative is my lawyer, Richard McIntyre, and I. Neither of us received notice, even though we spoke with Mr. Rosner. He promised to give us a notice, and Mr. McIntyre handed him his business card. I called Mr. Rosner on several occasions and did not get a return call. On one occasion I called him. We talked about certain things. I asked him, what's happened with the survey you promised me? He said, I don't have it yet. What's going on with the park? Nothing yet, and he never called me back. So we can just tweak it a little bit, and my architect will do the work and will move the dog park to the side and put the tables next to the restaurant, and my building is not coming down. The developer from out of town wants the building down so he can put a big high-rise there. My building is staying, and it will be an amenity to the community. We talk to people in the neighborhood. They say we would love it. We did not know that there was the possibility to do it. The people in the neighborhood support it, and I ask your help. Let's do, you have all the things that the architect prepared, what it will look like. Help me preserve an old building for myself, for the self of Tampa, for the self of the community. And I do have the financing in place to do the project.
I just want to thank you for being here, and you're young, 83 years old.
Mr. Chairman, if the speaker could state her name for the record.
Okay. My name is Malka Isaac. Shall I spell it?
If you would, thank you.
M like in mother, A like in apple, L like in lullaby, K like in kangaroo, A like in apple, Malka. Isaac, I, S like in Samuel, A like in apple, A like in apple, K like in kangaroo.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chairman, you just heard a new
Thank
hip-hop
you.
song.
It's
amazing what you learned here.
I have been in Tampa since 1968 and in the United States since 1960. And my accent originally, I'm from Israel, Jerusalem, the holy city.
I would have never noticed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Placer a conocerla. See that accent? Eso sí que es un acento, lo que tengo yo ahora.
Thank you very much.
Gracias.
Mr. Rosner, can you give us an update on this? Which would you prefer, November 14th or December 12th?
An update on the change of the plans? Or
Yes, sir.
Probably be fair to do the December 12th because we'll have to inform the team of what we'll have to need to do.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Rosner.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilman Miranda, would you like to make a motion
I'll
to
make
that?
a motion based on what I just heard here recently that Mr. Russell will come back on the 12th of December of the year 2019 to present the possibility of rearranging the dog park at Massey Park.
You heard a motion duly made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Carlson. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Not alone no more.
Motion carries. Are we all finished with public comment? Thank you. Agenda item number 6.
Did you vote?
No, not that motion. Mr. Lewis.
They're asking about the special motions that you want to make at the end.
We're not there.
No, we're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Second.
We have a motion duly made, seconded by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Miranda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item agenda number 7.
Second.
We have a motion made by Councilman Dingfelder, seconded by Councilman Goods, was it? Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Item number 8. A motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Carlson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Agenda item number 9. Motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Goods. All in favor say aye. Item agenda number 10.
So moved.
Motion made by Councilman Miranda, seconded by Councilman Goods. All in favor? Aye. Number 11.
Second.
I had a question on 11, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
EBOR staff, is Courtney still here? Or Michelle, maybe you know. So this item has a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 folks to include. It says ratify the appointment of these applicants for a 2-year term. Are other folks rotating off by natural attrition? Is this a clean sweep? What's going on here? That's a lot of folks at one time.
Their board generally is about 21. I don't want to quote an exact number, but it's in the 20s, 21, 25. It's changed over the years.
Okay.
So with 2-year terms, you get a natural rotation every year of some part of that board. Sometimes you get a change for their ex officios, that they get a new designation. Some people just are no longer continuing, and some are term limited off.
Okay, so
And
so the bottom line is we have continuity. There's another 10 or more folks who are staying on and know what's going on.
Mhm.
I didn't want to see a clean sweep with nobody knowing what the heck was happening. So.
They're the largest CAC that we have.
All right, thank you. I'm supportive, Mr. Chair.
Yes, you did. And you seconded? Sure. Motion made by Councilman Maniscalco, seconded by Councilman Dinkfelder. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Information and reports. Let's start with Councilman Dinkfelder.
Nothing today. A great presentation by Mr. Bennett and all of staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Goods.
I will concur, Mr. Bennett, with his leadership. Kind of started something here, getting me more information, detailed information. It's something that I'm kind of used to, with presentations and understanding what's going on. Are we waiting for motions still, Mr. Chairman? Are we make motions now?
It's time.
All right.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we had a previous motion made at the last CRA meeting reference the environmental pond and the 9 points in detail that I wanted as far as development of the environmental pond or retention pond at 22nd Street and 26th Avenue to 26th Street. Want to amend that motion to have it come back on November 14th with a detailed report on the environmental pond with Gene Duncan making that presentation.
Second.
We have a motion duly made by Councilman Goods, seconded by Councilman Dinkfelder. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, since we are here at the CRA board and it is our option to go forward with items, I would like to go ahead and make a motion for the needs assessment to be completed by the Parks and Recreation Department along with Ed Johnson with regards to a plan for renovation at Fair Oaks Park or rebuild of that particular park. I would like this report to be presented at the December 14th regular session meeting.
Second.
I'm deliberating on that, trying to figure out if this is CRA or City of Tampa.
We both. We can say both.
Okay. We have a motion made by Councilman Goods, seconded by Councilman Maniscalco. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Last and not least, Mr. Chairman, as you know, we've gone round and round. We've had several support as a reference to the Al Barnes Park Cultural Enrichment Center. We've had contributions from the county, the state representatives, and some of our other legislators have come on board who want to help out with this project. The general fund has already committed $1 million to this project. The CAC board did meet. There was a meeting. The chair was asked to come here and make a presentation. That presentation was made that they were willing to be on board with this project. At this time, I'm asking that the CRA board make that commitment of $1 million to the Al Barnes apartment for the Enrichment Center.
Second. We did that, it was transferred in the budget.
But we still need the motion verified. Motion made by Councilman Goods, seconded by Councilman Carlson. Any discussion? Any discussion, Councilman Dinkfelder? No? Your vote is? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Anything else, Councilman Goode? Councilman Mascalco? Councilman Vieira?
Nothing, sir. One, Mr. Chairman, this is something came out in the Tampa Bay Times this morning about baseball warrants Oakland drops two or else, and I don't know if it's CRA or not, but at the end it says, Rebecca Kaplan, the city council president, recently released a statement and reads in part, the interest of reducing strife and litigation in Oakland City Council has unanimously asked our administration to meet directly with the county leaders regarding strategies to resolve problems regarding our shared public property. My question to myself is, how can public property be shared? That's all. Something to think about.
Food for thought, yes, sir. Thank you, Councilman Miranda. Council Carlson?
To Fair Oaks Park that we talked about a minute ago, several folks have mentioned that there are rats in the building. I guess we can include this under CRA, but is it possible that somebody could give us an update on why there are rats and how we can get rid of it? Should we use CRA money to get rid of them and hire an exterminator?
We should do whatever it takes to make sure there's no infestation in Fair Oaks Park. So I heard that from both hats. So
I'd like to make a motion separate than Commissioner Goods, just that staff come back at the next meeting, what is it, November 14th, just to give us an update on the rat situation at Fair Oaks Park.
I'll second. Motion duly made by Councilman Carlson, seconded by Councilman Vieira. Is there any discussion? Councilman Dingfelder, do you have any discussion to that motion?
No, sir.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And then the other thing, similar to Councilman Goods, I just wanted to say thank you to Chief Bennett and the staff for working with us. I know we had a lot of expectations and discussions in the beginning, and I think we're getting close to getting to the smooth part, hopefully. And as we get through the plan and everything, I think we'll all figure out where we are and we'll be all on the same page. And I know we don't always agree either, obviously, but thank you all for working with us, and thanks for changing the format of the presentations.
Let's see. Yes. Chief, thank you very, very much. Ms. Van Loan, thank you very much, and all the other CRA, CAC members, thank you very much for this comprehensive discussion today. We do appreciate it. We will see you in the future on the 28th. So let's be ready for questions and answers. Motion to receive and file. Okay, we are adjourned until 6 o'clock this. Oh, okay. Motion to receive and file. I got a motion to receive and file by Councilman Miranda, second by Councilman Maniscalco. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion. We are adjourned until 6 o'clock this evening. However, we are supposed to have a workshop right now.
Well, actually, you were supposed to be done with your workshop about a half hour ago, in the best of times. That being said, Council, there are a bunch of alternatives that you face. First of all, just to share with you, I have been in touch with several attorneys from the legal department who wanted to participate, but because it's been running into the afternoon, they do have meetings scheduled for the afternoon. You also do have a lengthy meeting that begins at 6 o'clock tonight, and I'm very cognizant of that. You're well into the lunch hour as it is. So your options are to remove the workshop and just have it rescheduled, or that being the case, a suggestion had been made to me, and I'll pass it on to you. If council is willing to do it tomorrow morning between 9 and 11, or 10 and 12, or Monday morning, then we can. But in the meantime,
What is the pleasure of this board? Shall we keep the next regularly scheduled workshop, which is, can't do that either?
no, sir, and I'll tell you why. Because what this indicates to me is it needs to be done at a time certain. Otherwise, certainly your meeting today was of substance and of importance, so you didn't want to give anything short shrift. And certainly, frankly, Council, this is being done for your benefit primarily, and if you are hungry, tired, or have other plans, it doesn't serve anybody to have this meeting until you're such time as you're ready. So, your pleasure, council.
I think we need to reset it, but not just at a time certain, but a realistic time certain. When
Yes.
I saw 10 a.m., I was like, that ain't going to happen. You know what I mean? So I can't do tomorrow or Monday, but I would suggest we set it, but at a realistic time certain.
Yes, sir.
Would you like to give us some dates at tonight's meeting?
I'll take a look at that. Thank you. That's a great
Would that
suggestion.
be all right with this board?
So then, I guess we'll just post notice that I don't think, is there anything from a legal standpoint that we have to do to remove that, or just, it was scheduled to start at 10 o'clock, you're not in session now, council's not. I suspect we'll just put a note that it was canceled.
Sounds good to me. Board?
Thank you,
Okay.
council, thank you. Oh, excuse me, thank you, CRA.
Thank you.
Are you adjourned till 6 then?
Yes, we are adjourned until 6.